The time is 7:30. I call the June 18th Yardley Borough Council meeting to order. Please stand for the pledge to our flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please. Manager Johnson.
Mr. Carlson.
Present.
Mr. Feiner.
Present.
Mrs. Thompson. Ms. Siegel-Morris. Ms. Scherer.
Present.
Mr. Applebaum.
Here.
And Mr. Stump.
Zoom, Mark? Okay.
He expects to arrive during the meeting at some point, unless we make it a really quick meeting.
All right, moving on to community announcements. This is the portion of the meeting where members of council first and the public can tell us about upcoming events that they'd like us to be aware of. Anything from the table to start?
Anyone else? If not, I just
Go
want
for
to
it.
mention, let me just grab my notes. Tomorrow, Shirley Coursey, the Executive Director of the Gather Place, is sponsoring our Yardley Borough's second annual Juneteenth event, beginning at 6 p.m. Here in front of Borough Hall. And as successful as last year's was, this year's seems to be on course for being just as successful or more. And very excited that we're continuing to keep these traditions going. And because I don't know if Mr. Burney will be here later during my report, I'm not picking on you. I just want to thank you at this point for replacing the American flag in front of Pretty Burger as quickly as you did. I noticed that there was an issue, and I just want to thank you for taking care of that so quickly. And that's it.
Thank you, Mr. Applebaum. Anything else from the table? Community announcements? Any community announcements from the public this evening? Hearing none, we will move on to public comment. This is the portion of the meeting where members of the public can approach, state their name and address, and comment on matters not on the agenda. Please keep your comments to 3 minutes per matter. Any public comment this evening? Going once, going twice. Public comment closed. Consideration of consent agenda dated June 18th, 2024. It includes approval of minutes dated June 4th, 2024, certificate of appropriateness 24-12, 16 South Main Street, doors, windows, platform, and railing. Event permit Vault Brewing, Cars and Crafts, 714 at Vault Smokehouse. Consideration of FEMA-funded 93 North Delaware Avenue elevation change order number 3. Consideration of FEMA-funded 93 North Delaware Avenue elevation change order number 4. Does any member of council wish to remove an item from the consent agenda?
I would. I'd like to remove the approval of the minutes.
Okay, any other requests to remove an item? Hearing none, do I hear a motion to approve B through E?
So moved.
Motion has been made by Councilperson Feiner, seconded by Councilperson Siegel-Morris. Any discussion from council?
Yes. No.
We'll wait
Oh, I'm
until-
sorry.
Yeah, you're fine. Any, from B to
Oh,
E, any
from,
comments?
no comments for
Okay,
I'm sorry.
from council, from the public? Yes? Hey, Dr. Perlmutter, how are you?
I'd like to, it's the first time I've had this mic. I'd like to comment on the application for the event permit for the Vault Brewing, Cars and Crafts. I did, as soon as I saw the agenda, I did request a copy of it, but I haven't received it. But I would like to say that there has been issues with these events. The one that was on June, the last one that had the live music, you could hear it all the way down at, there was Main Street, up College, I forget, Yardley Commons. It was really loud. There was a parking issue where people were parking on the wrong side of College Avenue. In fact, several cars had parked right in front of somebody who had just moved in and were having a housewarming party. The event prior to that had the same issues. There were people complaining, people had called police, and I know there's an officer there, and one of the residents on South Main Street had gone over to complain to that officer, but I'm not sure how that works when it's an extra duty officer. They may just be there working for the people who are running it. I'm not sure how that works, but they, weren't responding to the music and the complaints. The other thing I would just like to bring up is that as you're aware, there was a huge zoning issue with that property, and they were granted a variance, but it had very specific conditions on it. And some of those conditions were there's absolutely no outdoor live music. The only one that has to do with an event permit was number 1, where it said the outdoor tent be dismantled and in the future not utilized without first obtaining an event permit. But the 4 other ones were separate from that. No additional indoor seating, no permitted outdoor seating, that there be no extension of the applicant's current Thursday through Sunday hours, and that the applicant comply with all Yardley Borough ordinances. And they have continually been in violation of number 4. They're open on Wednesdays, sometimes Mondays. They're not in compliance with the sound ordinances, and I'm really not sure how this works in terms of if granting an event permit can override the zoning variance, the zoning that was put in place specifically because of the residents. There's 3 different blocks there. So I don't know when you do that. And basically, a lot of residents, we basically decided, okay, if they have 1, nobody's going to complain. But we're going on 8, and that's no longer a special event. That's a business model. And basically, Fitzgerald Field was always, the reason we bought Fitzgerald Field was where these events would take place. The car shows used to be there, the beer fest used to be there, the craft shows. Everything was really supposed to be in Fitzgerald Field. So it's not that we don't want these things to go on, it's just been very disruptive. And maybe they can just be moved back to the public area, Fitzgerald Field, and being closer to their other businesses, they can, work off of that. Because I'm really not sure how this works in terms of special events, if you're allowed to override the zoning board's decision.
Sure, so I think we're over 3 minutes now. Thank you for your comments. I'll respond to a few things. Dr. Perlmutter, don't have it in front of me, haven't read it in a little while, but my recollection was tap room cannot have outdoor music unless they apply for a special event permit and council approves it. That was what was outlined by the zoning hearing board, how they are allowed to have outdoor events, and also there was some limitation on time. I believe all of the events have ended at a reasonable hour, similar to actually before when Music on Main ends. I haven't received any email complaints from anyone. I don't know if anyone on council has received any complaints, but we can take a look at the police report activity and see if there's anything out of order there. Nothing has bubbled up to my attention though, but we'll take a look.
And off the top of my head through daily review, I have no recollection of any complaints related to any of these events.
The parking issue though, if people are double parking, that's definitely something that we can take action
I
on.
didn't hear double parking. I heard they were parking in other people's spots.
No, on the wrong side, College Avenue, where there's no parking.
Okay.
So we'll take a look at that one. And I don't think that there has been anywhere near 8 this year, but again, I will double check the numbers. Thank you. Any other public comment this evening? Okay, hearing
Can
none.
I just,
Sure.
just an idea here, maybe where they're parking that they're not supposed to, if we can predict that,
to put cones like along the curb to kind of say, don't park there? Would that, maybe they could do it, or they could work with?
Mr. Brenner, you don't need to respond, but if you would like to respond, could you come forward, or you can pass, either way.
Not already signed, so.
Okay, so we can look into that. We don't,
yeah.
we wouldn't want to put that impetus on our police force to put codes
No.
up, but if that's something
Maybe
that
they
the business owner wanted to do, if this is a continued problem, we can have a conversation about that, certainly. All right, any other comment on consideration of the consent agenda? This isn't public comment, sorry, I got mixed up. I'll call the question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries 6-0. Do I hear a motion to approve the minutes dated June 4th, 2024?
Yeah, I'd like to make a comment about that.
So you can make a comment after the motion
After.
is on the table, yes.
Okay.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion was made by Councilperson Siegel Morris, seconded by Councilperson Finer. Discussion from council?
Thank you. Yes, at the last meeting, North Main Street property that's across from Friends Meeting House was referred to as Garden of Reflection. And, you know, I was surprised when I heard it then. And then when I read the minutes over again and I saw it again, I just want to just state that we already have a Garden of Reflection, and we just can't really call it that. And we'd have to vote anyway on what to call it. So I just wanted to state that, you know, I don't want to see it be called something that already exists. It wouldn't be fair.
That's a good point. It's just, you know, thanks for bringing it up. It's a nickname that came up to kind of
But it-
differentiate it from like a park. But I think we'll talk about it and figure out.
I just would hate to see it keep being reused, because
Sure.
there'd be a lot of confusion
Okay.
coming with that.
Thank you.
So would you like the minutes to be amended in any way, or just making a comment for the minutes this meeting?
Just making a comment, I just would want it on record that, like, I don't think we should continue with that phrase, that word, term.
Got it, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments on the minutes? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries 6-0. Are there any issues with the finance report submitted for June 18th, 2024? If no issues, it will be accepted as submitted. Okay, moving on into our working session with the first item under public safety, proposed special event ordinance. Mr. Foraker?
Good evening.
Good evening.
How topical. So, when we started doing event planning, I'm guessing 10 years ago, we were only having a few events per year, which was, Harvest Day, the Beer Fest, big things like that. As we all know, we've grown in our events here in town. This year, we have 8 events on private property. 5 of them are vault events. So I think it's time that we start codifying what we're doing. We're doing everything, I think, properly, but in my discussions this year with one event organizer that was it's on a private property, he made the comment to me that, I don't need to talk to you, it's on private property. Then I pointed out the traffic and pedestrian crossing concerns and how it really was our concern, and he kind of backed down. But that gave me pause, and I thought maybe it's time that we start codifying things. So in your packets, you should have seen a ordinance from one of our neighboring communities and what they enacted recently. And I think it's a pretty good ordinance, what they've done. The amount of time that I'm putting into events has grown exponentially in the last 10 years. I forget what it is days, but I send it out at the end of the year, my year-end report, And we're up to about 90 days worth of events. For a 1 square mile town, we're doing a lot. So by codifying things, we can, one, have a bigger say in what's going on in the community, and also attempt to recoup a little bit of the money we're spending on it. So that's what I'm thinking. My thoughts, they go along with the ordinance that you have in front of you, that it would kick in at 50 people or more. So, we're not targeting birthdays, graduation parties, things like that, but events. I think it's pretty easy to differentiate between a birthday party and a concert in the park. So that's what I'm asking you to consider.
Thank you. So it sounds like for our working session this evening, we're considering, so we have Laura Makefield's in front of us. Do we want to adopt something similar? I think hand in hand with this, what I feel I've heard requests for a lot from council and also from the public is not just an ordinance that helps staff to enforce and to have guidelines, but then a really like bite-sized FAQ page of like the process and steps to go through, which would marry with this if we decided to go this route. So I'll open it up for discussion.
I would love to see ordinances of other municipalities, especially downtown-style boroughs, just, as a comparison point. I don't know if you've come across any of those, just because I think there's a big difference in Lower Makefield because people generally drive to their destinations, whereas here...
Oh, I agree.
You know what I mean? So I think it'd be helpful, like you'll see later with the short-term rentals. I know Don brought in ordinances from different places. So that would be helpful. And also, I would love to know from you, is there anything in this ordinance that if we had it, functionally, how could you sum up, how would it be different for you and for the borough? Like the key points of difference?
Currently, we only have one event per year that requires me to report to the state, and that is Harvest Day, because we're exceeding 5,000 people. Harvest Day is between 10 and 15,000. State Department of Health requires a emergency medical plan to be provided to them when you cross 5,000. So that's the only thing. Like Lower Makefield, I think probably all of their events are exceeding 5,000 people that I'm aware of. So, codifying things just gives us some muscle, and I think it's time. So how would it be different from this ordinance? I don't know. That's why I wanted to get your input.
Madam President?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. I thought this is a very timely, very thoughtful, and a good idea. Is what committee, or is it under your jurisdiction that this is going to be written? And can we create or invite people who are interested in assisting to join and make some suggestions so that we can make this a truly lasting and well-written document?
I think that's up to you, not me.
Wouldn't we,
Well, then I'm suggesting it.
it would be public safety, would it not?
Yep, and so with any new ordinance, it would be posted publicly, and then we would have a hearing, or it would be on the agenda, and we could advertise that, so we would get ample input. But we could obviously invite people to provide input prior to it being drafted and formalized. That saves money if we can get input before it's drafted.
And I do understand, yes, it is public safety, but it's also, community outreach, it's economic impact, so I like to be part of that, conversation personally. Does anyone else want?
You're part of it. We're having it at the working session, so let's talk about it, and then we'll talk about it again in another one when we get closer, but.
Perhaps it would be beneficial for you to know the process, what we follow when somebody suggests or requests an event. Let's use Juneteenth as an example. I receive the event application, I review it, I talk to Paula. What do you think? I go to the chief. I work out my logistic things in my head. Anything on the paper that may or may not need tweaking, I go to the chief. I send him a copy. We sit down, we discuss. What are your concerns? Sometimes he says none. Sometimes he says, I really think because of the climate, we need to have an officer. Now, I know he tries not to have an officer when possible, but there are times when it has to be done in the interest of safety. So it's a team effort. It's a group thing. We can look to expand that group.
Well, you're talking, I'm sorry, Madam President, may I continue for a second? I think we're confusing two different things, and I understand, I'm not trying to fight you on this. What I'm saying is not once you have this in front of you as an ordinance, but prior to that, to help you craft this ordinance. That's what I'm asking.
I just don't want you to think that, I am the receiver and the grantor of all things events. It's not the way it works.
No, I
Everything is
don't
done
think that
by
at all, but
committee.
you're the one that's presenting it.
I'm the
I'm
speaker.
just,
So anytime we have an ordinance that blurs between multiple committees, this is the only forum in which we can have substantive conversation on it, because if we had community outreach, community economic development, and public safety,
right.
therein discussing the ordinance, that would be a sunshine violation. So we're here tonight to discuss, feel it out, how do we feel, is this the right direction? And then I think once we had something a little firmer, we would have it on another working session agenda would be the idea.
I would welcome that, because I don't think this is something we could get done tonight.
No.
We weren't intending.
And I think it does, I'm just thinking with structurally how to do this. If maybe it seems like public safety is taking the lead in this, maybe, that's the sense I'm getting. If that's the case, then community economic and development as well as community outreach could maybe do their own work to come up with their needs, because there are multiple needs to balance. There's the safety side, there's the community side, there's the attracting people to Yardley side, right? So we want to be able to have something successful that works for all of it.
And make it
I don't
easy.
think this has anything to do with, this is going to impact attracting people to Yardley. What it does impact is set of down guidelines that everybody would need to follow and be aware of.
Right.
And that also that to coincide with this, but separately would be updating the fee schedule to reflect
Right.
the costs associated with the permitting process, which right now is we don't.
So
even
you,
Right, but for,
you'd rather not be part of the group then? I disagree.
I just want to say,
I have no idea where that came from.
Well, no, you said that it's a public
I did
safety
not-
issue.
I said, I don't think it has anything to, this piece of paper, this ordinance doesn't,
but it-
This form is more like, I think, a safety issue so that we make sure that when somebody's having an event and when they apply, that they are safe and the borough is safe from lawsuits and whatnot. So one of the things that I did like on here was that proof of insurance is required, because I know sometimes that's not on the forms. And I think that's an important thing. I guess it depends on maybe what they're doing as to whether they need.
I'll give you an example of that. A few weeks ago, I had a resident contact me. They wanted to have a Pilates class at Fitzgerald's Field. So I talked with the person, and it turns out that she was going to instruct 10 of her friends one day on how to do Pilates. I said, go do it. Have fun. If we use the event plan, now she's got to go get insurance for one day, 10 people. That's what a park is for. We're looking at bigger things.
Events.
So
So,
the event plan that you have in front of you for the Smokehouse Car Show, it was in your packet. I don't see the information on that changing a whole lot. We've covered pretty much everything there. We're just giving it some muscle now.
so just one thing, hold on. Let's, in the interest of the working session and trying to get valuable feedback back to Wes, public safety, community outreach, whoever works on it. So I heard, let's look for examples from boroughs and from Councilperson Scherer that she likes the proof of insurance piece. What else in here do we like or not like? As we're looking for a different example, what did we, as we read through this, did we hate, did we like? Yes, Mayor Harding.
For Wes. Thank you. Wes, this example, and I know we're not tied to it, is based off of 50 people essentially. Do you, and you may not have the answer now, do you prefer basing it on people, right? Because someone could have a wedding in the borough that has 55 people attending. Or do we look at it in the fact of it is open to the public either through general admission or ticket sales or something like that? Again, we don't need the answer now, but I'm just thinking.
That's a very good
They had a
question.
55-person wedding on their pick a property, Lakeside, they have a 55-person wedding, probably not what we're thinking, but if they had a 49-person event where they were selling general tickets and we needed maybe some traffic control, so maybe the number can be there, it could be an and or something like, just thinking.
Well, yeah, I think the attendance level and the type of event.
So maybe
A wedding's a private event.
maybe you could say something, 50 and or selling public, and
Right.
give some discretion on a private event.
Right. The event I mentioned earlier where the organizer said he didn't have to speak to me, that never came to council because it was the first time they were doing the event. It seems innocuous. Chief and I discussed it, Paul and I discussed it, and he said, have fun, and we'll just monitor it. In that instance, the chief he notifies the duty officer to just be aware that there's something going on this date at this property. But yeah, I think you have to look at attendance, expected attendance, and the style of event. A private wedding, I don't know that would, but it could.
I don't think, I agree with you that I'm not sure it would.
Yeah.
I mean, again.
A wedding at the country club, would that, no, it wouldn't, because that's their business.
I don't want to pick on certain, let's just say it was a wedding on Main Street though, and they
Yeah.
were inviting 100 people and traffic was an issue. Maybe that kicks into, hey, now we have some things.
I know, it's interesting you mentioned Lakeside, because last year or the year before,
They had their
they did have a big event where they did valet parking. So that's how they reached out to me and we went through all the processes. And what I do in those types of events is I have them complete our event application, but I only use it in-house. So it's a way to notify the police what's going on. I can tell EMS, fire, any other organizations that need to, but it doesn't necessarily need to come up to this level for a blessing.
Just a thought, something.
Thank you. That's a good thought.
Other comments, Cory?
Well, just in terms of, I understand what you're saying, it's public safety and not questioning that. But I think there are things that we could do that may be unintended consequences in maybe the fee structure or other aspects to this that could cause problems for certain events that are beneficial for the public. So all I'm suggesting is that the other groups weigh in as well, so we don't
Yeah,
do
because I
that.
think that's just a given, and that we always have the ordinance, that you all had the ordinance to read and weigh in on, and obviously that would be the same case in the future. Also, anything to do with fees would be separate from the ordinance, so the ordinance would remain unchanged, right? Isn't that what?
Right, I don't think it's a good idea to be putting fees in the ordinance because then you can't adjust.
Right.
So I'm, sorry.
This probably wouldn't take take effect until 2025.
Right,
And also, then we would map out the process, which I kind of was like mapping it out in my head to understand, like, oh, what happens when you submit an event permit? Who sees it first? Wes. And then he, what happens next? He meets with the chief, and then it comes to us for review in our packet, and then, we read that, and then we vote on it here. And then after that, obviously, the event is held, if there's police needed, they show up, whatever. We could have a debrief if it was an event that went unexpectedly or not how we expected. So there's a lot of things we could put in place to,
Plus, I think.
Something like the farmer's market, is that would that be considered, how do you know if it's going to draw 50 people, if it's something like that?
Not 50 all at one time, though, is it?
Well, sometimes it might, I don't know.
At the
the
same
farmer's
time.
market is like they
Well,
don't need an event.
The farmer's market will qualify because we're reserving the park for them on a regular basis. So in my mind, they would have to follow the ordinance. But also, and I did think about this, So, because we don't want to financially hurt any organizations, I do think it's fair to ask them to pay for the application and pay for the usage for the event. Now, the event is 40 weeks for them, or it could be one day. Just pay the fee, because that helps defray the cost of taking care of the park. That's all. So, their I'm just saying $50 would be the same $50 that a one-day event, Beer Fest, would pay for using our facilities.
Yeah, I'm hearing it in the exchange, especially between Mayor Harding and Mr. Forker, that there is a process in place that you follow. It's working well, but it's not codified in any way.
Right.
And so that makes it unclear sometimes to you all if there's a new thing that you've never dealt with before, or unclear to people who are applying because there's nothing on the books. So agree about the unintended consequences. That's why we should make sure that it's drafted for our town in keeping with what we want to uphold here and invite, but also provide structure. Just make sure we're finished up here, and then I'll open it up to the public. Any other comments from council? Specific feedback is very helpful as we're jumping into drafting a new ordinance. Anything we absolutely hate or love from the example given?
I'm sorry, I don't want to, sorry. I just feel like that I wasn't heard. And I'm going to say what I want to say, if you don't mind. May I go?
If you feel like you have something new to say, sure.
I feel that this is an opportunity to do something that may be out of, it may not have, the things that I want to suggest or the other committees may want to suggest may not directly affect the pending ordinance that they want to codify, or we want to codify. But it's still important to have input from those other committees because it does affect it doesn't just affect public safety, it does affect the economic impact, because if we can make doing business in this town easier, seamless, then more people may want to have events, or at least make it easier for them to find the information. I appreciate that Wes will be the first person to receive a permit, but prior to that, maybe our website or other social media or whatever may be improved, ways of communication may be improved so that people will have better information prior to filling out a permit or a special events permit.
That is in the planning right now.
Okay,
So
but
I think, having looked at the webpage that has all of our permitting and forms on it, that perhaps all of those forms should have a process that go with them.
So I think the two options we have, Councilperson Applebaum, for more input would be, like I had already stated, about working on it during a working session when we have multiple committees, or we could do a pass the ordinance style where it originates from public safety, then they finish their work and comment, it's then passed to community outreach, they do their work and comment, then it's passed to community economic development, they do their work and comment, then it comes back to council. Both can be very effective. The latter takes longer, but that's okay if we're not expecting this to pass until 2025 anyway. Does the latter option sound better to you in terms of providing feedback, or?
Oh, yes, thank you. I appreciate it. And sorry, I didn't mean to step on you earlier. It was an accident.
Oh, no. The
I apologize.
to figure out how to work well together. And then I think what I'm hearing is you believe those committees will have substantive feedback, but don't necessarily know what that might be yet.
No,
it's going to be helpful to workshop.
That's correct.
Okay, got it. Sounds good. Okay, anything else from up here?
Oh, just as a comment from Jared, because he texted me, he's able to hear the meeting, but he can't speak in it. He suggested looking at media PA. I guess he knew that they had an event ordinance, and they seem to have one that
They have a
very nice legible codification system here. I don't know who's doing it, but we may want to take note because it's so much easier to find things in here than ours. But I was just looking at through there. They have one, so that may be a place to look at, just to kind of summarize the different parts. If we're going to go through it, maybe there are ideas, there are things we didn't think of that might be helpful.
Absolutely. There's no harm. One thing I'd like to add, for some events, like Tai Chi in the park, which starts tomorrow, I spoke with the organizer by the phone, got the plan, forwarded it to you, you approve. Other events, before the event happens, after the plan is done, but before the event is held, we bring the organizers in, and we sit down and we go through the plan to make sure that everybody's on the same page and we have expectations that are being met by all the disciplines. So I think that's important for you to know, that we're not just, there is involvement. We're meeting with the people. Harvest Days especially, we have to bring them in. We sit down. We have a lot of back and forth with Harvest Day Committee because that's such a big event in this town. So just wanted you to know that portion.
Regarding the discussions between committees and the ordinance, I do think that having it go from like public safety to community and economic, all of those conversations will happen in silos.
Unfortunately, they have to.
Right, but then the public really won't be privy to those. Whereas I feel like when we adopted the graffiti ordinance, right, we talked about it here together as committee, or as council, and talked about it and ironed the things out and worked on it that way.
So I think we can do both, right? So it doesn't sound like this is anywhere near ready for a vote, so we can have each committee work in succession on it and then have it come back for a working session to make sure, and then invite the public to that.
Would it be helpful for me to draft something to share amongst the different committees? A sample, basically draft an ordinance?
I think that would be great, and I think can we all spam you with other municipal
You're going
templates
to
that we
anyway.
like?
You're going to anyway.
Yes, we are.
Like, just a thought, I don't know if this is like the drafting, when you draft it, you have all this language, but if sometimes just like a chart with these are the things that we
Yeah.
want, and then like, I'm almost envisioning, I think we did this for short-term rentals, where you showed other municipalities. That was a very good format, because you could see right away, these are the things that are being regulated, and this municipality is doing it this way, this one, this, and you know what I'm saying, like a grid. It makes
It's
it
just an
easier
outline. You're
to-
just looking for an outline.
Yeah,
You're
and
not
then
looking for the whole
instead of
verbiage,
having
just an
to,
outline.
whereas, and
Sure.
Wes has to be a lawyer, and
But I like to write like that.
maybe you like that, another career, but.
All right, that sounds like a good idea. So bullet points of our, like our walkaway issues, what we definitely want to see in the final product is helpful. Anything else before I invite the public to come forward and talk on this one? Great. Dr. Perlmutter.
I think the ordinance is a great idea. I have been looking at the permits. The permits are very comprehensive. I think it pretty much has everything in there, but the problem is, it's not enforced. For example, one of the questions on the permit, it requires to notify neighbors and nearby businesses when you're having an event. It actually asks the person how they're going to do that. And again, with all of these events that have occurred already at the Vault Smokehouse, I'm about as close as you can get. It's right across the street when people drive in there, and I have never been notified. If I didn't participate in the town, I wouldn't know. The other things on there are really excellent. It goes into how many porta potties per person, how many handicap bathrooms, the police, everything is in there. So I just think that writing up the ordinance is good, but you really need to focus on how it's going to be enforced. Because if it's not enforced, we're just back to writing things up. So that's what I wanted to say.
Thank you. Any other comment from the public? Hearing none, we will move on to general government. I'll turn it over to Councilperson Carlson for our 2024 first 5 months. Sounds like a movie or something.
Okay. Can you pull up the PowerPoint?
2024 budget. 5 months. Yeah.
Can you go full screen? There you go. Okay.
Airplane where the screen is.
We lost it.
Yeah, you get the movie theater late. Sure enough.
There. Look, she's got the front row. He's in the front row of the theater seat. Okay. All right. Go back to please to the summary page. Okay. So just to reset everybody as to the way the approach we took for 2024. We basically, when we put the budget together, was based on the data as of October 17th last year. So we looked and we made projections about what was going to happen in the fourth quarter of 2023. And we had a lot of cost savings things going on in the fourth quarter of 23, and that allowed us to cut expenses significantly and to increase revenues in the end. And so that allowed us to carry over 94,000 of funds from 23 to 24. So now I want to show you, again, like I did in February, but this time we're through 5 months, how we've been doing against that as we get almost halfway through 2024. Next page, please. Okay, when we look at the income side of the equation here, the column that you see, the first column that you see, it says 2023, is what we expected to happen at the end of 2023. So, and how did we do against those projections? So as it comes out in 2023, we got 24,950 more in revenue than what we thought when we put the budget together. So that was good. So that was a helper towards 2024, because anything that happened good in 2023 that was unexpected helped the 2024 budget. So for instance, real estate transfer tax came in at 124,900, which was basically $5,000 better than what we thought when we put the budget together. Interest was a little later. The big winner was in police services. Maybe not for the right reasons, but Abrams and others demanded more police services that were reimbursable, so we got more income there. And we had some other one-time things. Now, when you look at the middle column, which is January through May of this year, a little different story. Unfortunately, on real estate transfer tax, I'm going to go into a page on that in a minute separately, but it's been dismal. It's basically been at 50% of the projected rate. We're looking at 120,000 is what we budgeted for income for the year, and we are 29,100 behind that pace. And this data is actually 6 months because the real estate transfer tax comes in at the beginning of the month. So in that one, full year projection is we have a 63,000 headwind if things continue at the current rate.
Ask a question now, or should I wait?
Sure. No, you can ask anything.
I just wanted to know if, in that calculation, are you accounting for when the most number of sales are?
Yeah. Could you go to the next page, please?
Sorry, I didn't want to throw you off.
It's all right. It's all right. No, it's fine. We'll do one topic at a time. Okay, this is real estate transfer, and in the first couple of columns are last year. So last year, we had 12 grand in the first month, and then 2 grand, 6 grand, 11 grand, and then we had some bigger numbers towards the end of the year, and it ended up at 124,000. This year, and one thing you got to remember, when you see a deposit date of 1/8/24, that's December home closings. Everything's off by 1 month. Okay, so when you see in January, you think, oh, it's cold in January. Well, but you got people who do things at the end of the year, and so we started off pretty good, 10 grand the first month, but then it dropped way down, 3,400, 6,400, 1,000 in April, and May and June are down in the 3,000 to 4,000 range. So, we're at a pace right now where we're only at like 4,700 a month. So we're basically essentially half of where we should be. And in this case, it's not like revenue coming in for property taxes, which has a much more pattern. When the bills are due, when people pay. People don't. You could say there's a little bit at the end of the year, and maybe a little bit in the late spring selling seasons. Okay, but one of the things, and I can just speak for Yardley Walk where I live, we had 9 home sales last year, and we've had 0 this year, or maybe 1 carried over from December, but, and those are roughly 4,500 apiece. So you have some houses just aren't going on the market like they were last year.
So your estimate for income is based on, in the past, how many houses sold, and you're kind
Well,
of projecting
yeah.
how many will be sold?
Yeah,
Which is a really-
it's hard to say, because
it's a wild card.
it can go way up or way down, you know? We were 168,000 the year before, then we
Right,
dropped it to 120,
Yeah,
and we ended up at 124.
it's very unpredictable, though.
It's
Yeah.
very unpredictable, that's true.
So maybe Mayor Harding can speak on this, working in real estate, but I spoke
Yes.
to a realtor about just chatting about this topic, and it used to be like April was a big month because people wanted to be in their home before the school year, because
Yeah,
you used to
yeah.
have, like, my first home was 90-day close.
Yeah.
Now, people are closing in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, so it's,
Everything's
literally
different,
any
yeah.
month can be hot, because they can still get in before
Right.
they need to be there, so.
And with the ongoing tease of when interest rates going to come down, people could wait longer to make, later in the year to make their buying decision and still be ready for September school, or still be ready for June,
And I
you know?
think people have the intention of selling and then decide to wait.
So
You know.
it's hard to say. I mean, I'm not here to say I'm a good predictor. All I'm saying is if we continue at this rate, we got a $63,000 problem. That's all. If we continue at the rate of the first half of the year. So it's a headwind, obviously. You can switch around. Okay, could you go back one slide, please? Okay, so obviously that was a big one. The cable fees is off a bit. That's indicative of, remember, our cable fees are based on Verizon and Comcast, and as more cable cutting or going to streaming people go, the revenue's coming down a little bit. So maybe, shame on us, maybe we should have predicted it to drop more. I think we dropped it 20% in the budget, didn't we? We dropped it 20%.
Madam President,
So we figured another 20, sorry, yes?
Don, when you say cable fees, are we referring to TV versus, because everyone needs internet to get even streaming services. So I'm
Right.
just curious what you mean by, I don't know. I'm just asking.
Franchise tax fee.
It's the franchise fee.
It's on everybody's cable bill. There's a line that says franchise tax, and that's what.
So if they cut the TV portion out, then that means.
Sure.
Okay,
Right,
thank
so if you go from a $200 bill to a $49 bill,
okay. Thank you for the clarification, I appreciate it.
anyhow, so that's another little headwind. On the positive side is interest. And if you could move forward, 2 slides forward, please. Okay. I'll just remind everybody, I know I went through this last time, but people may have forgotten. When it comes to interest, because we went to Pliget, which was very good a couple of years ago, it's been a winner when interest rates are high. At least we're taking advantage of the money we have and getting a better return on it. The top half of the page is restricted funds, which means the interest we earn in those funds can only be used in those particular funds. And the ones at the bottom are non-restrictive, so that's money that can be used on different funds. Anyhow, so it's another good year, and the reason it's a good year is because we were a little conservative when we did the budget. Last year, we ran at about 5.1% on average return, and then we budgeted 4%. So we budgeted this year, because we thought interest rates by now might be starting to drop a bit. And as of last month, we were still at 5.4%. So when you look at that 4 to 5.4%, that's a pretty big percentage delta. And so that's why we're up. And we could, if it continues at this rate all year, we'd be 22 grand ahead. But I still think it'll come down a little bit in the fourth quarter. But that's an area that's working favorably for us, obviously. Okay, back 2 slides, please. Okay. Police services, I commented on before. That's a favorable one. It was favorable at the end of 2023 by $1,800. So far through May, it's favorable even more, $7,900. And it'll likely end up at least $11,000 favorable by the end of the year. And hopefully we won't get rained out in Harvest Fest this year, and because that's we get some income from them as well. Insurance dividends was a one-time thing, and inspection fees was we were conservative in what we get in inspection fees at the end of last year, so that just carried forward as a help for this year. So overall, on the income side, even though we might be down 63,000 on transfer tax, we've got some other things that are offsetting it, and so my projection now is to be down around 13,000 on the income side. So that's the headwind there. Yes?
Just to put that figure in a broader perspective, what percentage of total income is that? About a 1% decrease? Are we down, or 10%?
Don't know that off the top of my head.
Okay, no worries.
You? I'll let you know. I'm not
it's okay.
sure. It's a third of a mil. Okay, let's go to the, go forward 1, 2, probably 3 pages. And now we're expenses. Okay, so what we did is we said income down a little bit. So now let's look the flip side of that. You can either get more income in, or you can have less expenses. Those are the two good things we want to see happen. So again, same format, except numbers in black are good, numbers in red are bad. The police department did a really good finish to the end of last year, 24,700 under what we thought was going to happen in 2023. So it's a very key, big help to this year. And under so far this year. I mean, part of that is driven by it's a tough environment to get people in here to work, but still that's a very favorable number. Right to know requests. Last year was an interesting year with right to know requests. It started off pretty heavy, and then by the summer, from the summer to almost the end of the year, it was extremely light, which was good. And so we ended up a little better than what we had budgeted for it, $780, a little bit better at the end of 2023. Unfortunately, right out the gate, starting in 2024, in January, we've gone the other direction, and we're in May now, we're already 3,700 higher than what we projected, and it's a total of $10,000 spent so far. And our budget's only 15, so if we continue at this rate, which hopefully we won't, that's an $8,000 problem if it keeps going at this rate. So that's one that is bothersome. The next, we grouped together engineering, and these are the 3 pieces of engineering: pure engineering support for us, plus grant writing, plus stormwater management kind of stuff. All of that under the RV umbrella, basically. Unfortunately, we started the year in the hole because a lot of money we spent in the fourth quarter last year that was not predicted, at least not predicted by the government committee in October. So we're down 10 grand starting the year. Through May, we're a little better. Unfortunately, we had some numbers come in this morning. That 6,500 now is only 5,000 favorable, but it is a little bit favorable in terms of what has been spent so far. But I don't see us overcoming. I haven't seen any evidence that engineering is going to be under the budgeted levels by 10,000 to be able to make up for what happened in the fourth quarter of last year. So I think that's going to be at least a $10,000 headwind, unfortunately. Insurance was a frustrating one. We purposely went out, bid the jobs out last year because you hear a lot in the press about insurance rates going up everywhere. So we wanted to get ahead of that, and we did go out to bid it, and our experience rate is what hurt us because we ended up, even though we went out, we ended up about 12% higher. Our insurance costs for 2024 are up about 12% rate-wise from 2023. And unfortunately, it's a timing thing where you don't see that. These insurance companies won't commit to what their rates are for the next year. They don't care about our budgets. They won't commit to them in September when we need them. They commit to them second and third week of December, which is frustrating. Anyhow, even after we approved the budget. So that's a tough one. And there's really nothing we can do about that one because it is what it is. We have our policies. We went out to bid it. They all went up, or our options went up, and we're kind of stuck with it. Okay, building maintenance, public works. Again, strong finish last year. A little behind the 8 ball this year, primarily because we had a little bit of snow, believe it or not. We actually had to have a little snow removal that we didn't have in the prior year. Prior year, we spent 0. Anyhow, so that's a couple grand there. Code enforcement, planning and zoning, down a little bit. We had a little, zoning had a lot of time spent on 1 or 2 projects where we had a lot of solicitor work, et cetera. So a couple grand under there. The rest of our solicitor work has been great so far this year, knock on wood, under budget. General government's in pretty good shape. So make a long story short, we're looking at about a $10,000 headwind on, about a $2,900 favorable on the expense side, which gives an overall around $10,000 negative impact. So the sky's not falling, but we have some big, between the transfer tax, the right to know things, and insurance, we don't have room for extra. So if you think we got extra money for extra projects, it's not really there. But these can swing. It can get worse. I don't think it's a totally pessimistic view. It's more of a run rate view, more of a looking at if what's happened in the first 5 months continues. This is kind of where we'll be. But maybe we'll get some favorable ones come in there too. So with that, I'll take questions as to on the year to date on the finance side. Any questions?
Just to piggyback on what the mayor said, so the total budget is what these days?
I don't have the number.
Ballpark.
Well, with
I
the
think it's just good for the public to get a context because they're seeing.
elevations, it's a couple.
Yeah, the reason I hesitated in that is because you have this big pot of money that's
I
out
know,
there,
you have.
It's
right,
hard.
which is millions.
Right, so it's what? So what's it say? It's,
Well, our general fund taxes brings in close to 800,000.
right,
And then you have all your other funds as well.
yeah. So it's 7 figures,
Yes.
let's say.
It's like 1 point.
1 point something, yeah, we're just over a million.
So this isn't, like you said, not the sky's falling. It's 10 grand in the context of over $1 million. It's a small piece, but it's,
Right.
I commend you for doing this and for having us all understand where we stand.
Any other?
Yeah, this is excellent. We all need to have eyes on this. Every decision we make, we need to have this in our minds, so it's good to keep track of it.
Okay. That's where we are. And then in general, obviously it's summer now, but come September, we're already starting to work on 2025 budget and starting to get inputs, but that'll all be formalized at our next meeting. We'll lay out the calendar of exactly when we're going to be doing what through September, October, to get us to a budget in December.
Excellent. Thank you, Councilperson Carlson. Anything else on that item, or should we move to the next? Any comments from the public on that? Okay. So as I alluded to at our last meeting, we are contemplating some changes to how we do council member reports. We know them currently as verbal reports given every meeting. There's just been some confusion from within council, from the public about what everybody's working on, what action items have been taken outside of the council meetings, what has been the follow-up after we vote on something. So it feels like the verbal reports are outdated and we need to do a little more. And I think by doing a little more, we might find we become more efficient. So if you could please, Mark, share first the PowerPoint committee reports. PowerPoint one? Yes.
No.
Committee reports, PowerPoint. Mhm. You go to the next slide. I don't know why I put a title in there. We don't need a title, but.
It's a nice title.
All right, so I think all of us know, but just to put it out there and focus our minds on this topic, project management can be the difference between an efficient project and a drawn-out project. We've certainly seen that with some of our projects in the borough. They also affect budget and how much we're spending when things get drawn out. Sorry, some typos in here. Keeping progress of every task, twice, at every stage for every deliverable. And so that would be the goal eventually. We want to keep track of all of the tasks, all of the stages, all of the deliverables. Eventually, we can start smaller than that. I don't want anybody to be scared away by that end goal. So anything that we would call an active project, initiative, or campaign, we would want to try to keep track of on a working document that is accessible to the committee and borough staff. Obviously not related to personnel or legal issues or confidential matters, but anything that we would want that the public can know about could be tracked on this document. And so I've put together several potential tracking templates that I'll show in a moment, but can you go to the next slide? So we are not the only organization that does things like this. So just a quick Google search pulls up some public works departments, some water company, and also a building and zoning office that post all of their active projects on their website. Some of them are not complex at all. You can see it's just a paragraph with a link to the permits and the plans. And then the one at the bottom, approved development plans, had a little more under each address. It had all of the next steps, timeline, fees paid, et cetera. So you can make it big or small. Next slide, please. So I'm proposing that we start with the committees of council, but obviously if we could roll this out beyond the committees of council to the liaison committees that we have in the borough, that would be amazing. So in addition to efficiency, I feel like this would be better communication between staff and council, better communication among council, and then just to throw a wild card out there, our right to know solicitor encourages us to put anything we can on the website. So what if, crazy idea, we weekly or even have the live document, I'm not sure how that would work. This is a working session, we could talk through it up on the website so that anyone can see it and they don't have to ask for any of the information, it's just up there on the website. Can you toggle to the Excel sheet, please, Mark? I'll pause there. Any comments so far?
I can't wait to do that. But actually, and I don't know if everybody sees it this way, and that's okay if not, but I would like to share with the public as well. The internal document, to me, if we share that with the public, that actually, not only is it great for the public to know what we're doing, but it's great for the other members of council to see it, because once it's public, we don't have a sunshine issue anymore. So it's a workaround to that whole issue in a beautiful way. So, good job.
Yeah, with some caveats. Like we can't all be working on it, but yeah, like the document in PDF form or something. Still working through the kinks of that, but I agree with you. It's, I think working sessions were the first step towards this, but really going beyond that and, a working session with the public is only valuable if the public is informed to the same or almost the same level as council is, so that they could really discuss the matter with us. So that's kind of a cool angle. Councilperson Stump looked like you wanted to say something, but I might have been reading that wrong.
I'm just concurring, that's all.
Any other comments before we look at the templates that I've just thrown together? Okay, the Excel sheet. All right, can you start with the project tracker one? So these are compatible because down at the bottom. Okay. Yeah. See the tabs right after key.
No,
On the tabs
at the very bottom, the tab.
The Excel tabs. Yep.
There you go.
The first one, the project tracker.
Left,
Next one.
One over.
left, yeah, down, yeah.
Project tracker.
Go left, the other left.
Yeah.
The other left.
All right, so I put together a few examples. I thought this one, can you scroll back up to the top, might be nice for, I don't think it's at the top, but might be nice for Public Works. You can put in each task that's open, a description of the task, what the priority is, who's responsible for it, your target end date, and then a status. Has it been delayed? What's the immediate next step linked to that task? And then you can put your notes or links in there. You can link documents in here. So again, because this is Excel, Microsoft, it's compatible with the Microsoft universe. We have OneDrive. Haven't thought that out all the way yet, but it seems like it could work in terms of multiple people on a committee working on the document. Down at the bottom, these are just, it's a timeline tracker. I don't want to spend too much time here because these are just simple Excel sheets, but I think a good Excel sheet can go a long way. So this one links to the project tracker, so it shows you, if you scroll to the top, Mark. Looks like it's at the bottom. On the side.
Right,
The scroll bar on the side.
Right side bottom.
the right side, yeah.
So it's just a calendar, and you can see the different categories: grant writing phase, design, bidding, construction, post-construction, and again, it feeds directly from the project tracker. Okay, committee progress. This is a more informal one for non-public works committees that aren't spending millions of dollars, and they feel like that might be too complex for them. So again, scroll to the top. You can have discussion items and then weekly updates of things you've been working on in committee with notes. So for example, under the weekly updates for the team, and then maybe for the liaison to Experience Yardley to put in weekly updates, and the liaison to the YBA. And then finally, another option at the bottom, tax tracker, would be the most simple, kind of amalgamates everything into one. So this is one that I put together with community outreach in mind. Maybe they're working on the website map, verbiage updates to the website, an alert bar we've talked about for emergencies, having a pop-up on there with different comments. So they're kind of all similar but different. Wanted to give you all options. Welcome feedback if this is the right direction or if I've gone astray terribly.
Definitely the right direction.
Yeah, I'm just thinking that different people, different committee chairs will have different, I mean, you kind of alluded to it already. Is that something that you see as having this evolving like that, sort of the idea of the visibility being the same, but the way that they get there and the content they put there being unique to that committee and to the style of those people?
Yes, definitely open for creative expression here. I do think that we should get better about using a centralized system for document management, and that all of our stuff should live probably connected to our Outlook accounts if we can get it to a point where that works for us. And I know that that's different. We're all doing our own things right now, but back to Right to Knows though, if we are keeping all of our documents linking to these, like I think we could set it up so that staff have access to that and they could just pull documents directly, and that would be really great. So that would be the end goal, but I don't think we need to get there immediately. Any other feedback? I mean, if this sounds good, I'd like to work in the next couple months to meet with each committee and talk through how you could get this off of the ground for your committee. But having a lot of substantive feedback before then would be helpful so that we can have a good jumping off point.
I would like to work with you because I look at that and I'm like, oh. I'm like,
Yeah, so the nice thing about these are they're templates, and so you just click, plug and chug.
once you get used to it,
Yeah.
you know.
Any other feedback? Okay, sorry, I did have, if you go back to the PowerPoint, Mark, I did have one slide with discussion items, just making sure we hit all of them.
When can we start using it? Tomorrow?
Yeah, I'd love that.
I mean,
I can send it out tonight, and if you'd like to give it a whirl, go
I
for it.
mean, to me, that, I don't know, I think Ori might agree too, that, you know, it'd be nice to start getting our stuff in that format.
Yeah, one thing that to connect to what David is saying is that we've talked about having like a parking lot page on the website so that we could link the public and council people, for that matter, to the various documents that we're keeping and the structure that we do, just as a launch point, because when they open that, it's going to be, you know, kind of like a static page that's coming from live, a living, breathing document that keeps changing. Right?
So you can't navigate to it from the actual website, but if you have a direct link, you can get to the document.
Yeah, we would just need a page that we can put links in, a page that we could actually add, you know, links to it in Public Works, for example. But I think other committees could do the same thing. Either you could add the link or you could give us access to add a link, and that's all it would be. Maybe, like you saw, there was one, there was like a sentence and a link. It could be like that, but just the idea that we could have this spot, because then people know, oh, you want to know what's happening with Public Works projects, you go there, and then you see the stuff.
Is our website still built on Squarespace? So, yeah, you can restrict permissions that we could give read-write access to just one page, I believe. We used to be able to do that
Yeah.
anyway, so that would be nice, so that counts, so people could dump things there. Do you know, or can you find out, Manager Johnson, what our memory quota is? Because that would be good to know. All right, can you, Mark, go to the last slide and just want to make sure I hit on everything. Sounds like yes. So I would say to the sustainability piece, and how often, I would love it if we could update these weekly. Obviously, for some committees, that's not going to be necessary. But before every meeting would be really great. Do we feel like that is a sustainable practice? And then I'll probably have to kick the next one to our solicitor in terms of, does it have to be like a PDF version if we're gonna post it publicly, or can we have 3 council members editing while the public's also viewing live and other council members? Like, I know the answer is gonna be that there haven't been any sunshine rulings, so there's no case law on it. So we might have to make an educated, informed analysis. I can't imagine anybody would be upset with providing more information to the public, but you never know. And then obviously I have some follow-up items on tech questions and how compatible this will be.
Which vendors I'm sorry, Madam President.
I just meant our FC working on the website, talking to them about any links. Like, I thought we had some external apps embedded in our website, so I would just want to talk through all of those. It's an open action item for me. So I won't drag this out anymore. It sounds like we're in the right direction. Any other comments from council?
I just think a challenge that we're going to have to work through is the varying technical expertise levels amongst everyone, and can somebody break it inadvertently easily in the trickle down effect to the whole thing, you know? To be able to have everything linked and visible is great, but it also sets you up for opportunities to screw it up at the beginning.
Yeah.
So getting some sort of training wheels on, particularly at the beginning, you know, or maybe training wheels to certain individuals. I don't know, just so that we manage it right.
I think to your point that there's going to be, I'm just kind of been thinking through the turnover of council people as well and committee chairs, that there's going to be different styles, and that we need a distinction. And I'm thinking really right now in terms of the public seeing it, right? They need to know that what they're looking at is
something internal from the committee, not official.
It has been voted on, yeah.
Yeah, so we need some sort of like container for it that's, here are things we're doing for transparency purposes. This is these people, and this is what they think, but it hasn't been voted on, it hasn't been approved, it's not representing the staff. You know, we need like that solicitor overall
That's no
disclaimer.
fun, though.
Yeah. And
No,
then,
I
and then
agree.
it'll change. New
Yep.
person comes in and they'll have a different style. And that's probably, if we allow for that, will be more long-term usable than having it be more rigid. And,
No, but I think as a newer council person, I'll add the input that I would love something like this because I often don't know that there are processes for things until I break them. And then I found out I broke the process or there is no process. And so I'm, inadvertently, oh, am I stepping on toes? Am I on a landmine? Am I on another committee's toes? I don't know sometimes. And so anything like this would be helpful because at least it gives me something to see and then go, oh, okay, I can then pick it up pretty quickly from there. And it would also be helpful for me because, I've just kind of been creating my own system. So especially with chairing community outreach, I've got 3 cell phones, I've got an email account, I've got Evernote. I have stuff everywhere. And, obviously not everything needs to go into that. But, this would help me tremendously. And I'm willing to, I'm one of the tech challenge people as well because right now I can't get into my Brewer email because I can't get Microsoft to work. So I will need some help as well.
I'm happy to help with that. Yeah, sounds good. All noted. We'll work through the kinks, but I think we need to start moving in this direction. Ori and I have talked before, Councilperson Finer, sorry, about, an LMT, as soon as a permit application is submitted, it's live on the website and you can like your pizza being made, you can see it move through the process. It's all public. And that's, I feel like, not to say LMT is the gold standard, but anything that we can get out there that we all can see and the public can see, I think is going to make us more efficient and just reduce requests. Any comments from the public? Yes, Dr. Perlmutter.
This is wonderful. I can say with certainty it will reduce requests. Like for example, tonight when I wanted to comment on the permit application, I haven't seen it. And then I had to put in a right to know request and still didn't get it in time for the meeting. But this is really everything I wanted in terms of right to know requests, just having this kind of information available. So I think it's a great idea.
Great, thank you. Did the air conditioning die?
I turned it down. Kim and I were freezing.
Really?
I will turn it back.
But not like what it was before.
Okay, yes.
It was literally shaking.
Okay. All right. Thank you, everyone. Let us move on to short-term rentals. Whose item is this?
Me.
Back to Councilperson Carlson.
I thought you reduced the air conditioning after you saw the budget report.
Can you bring up the STR PowerPoint? There we go. Yep.
Okay.
Make it full screen. Great. Okay, let's bring it back in November is when we first started talking about the short-term rental scenario. And at that point, I went through what are some of the things that different townships and boroughs, how they handle it, what they have in their ordinances or not. And we got to the point where we came to the agreement that yes, we should have something because it's kind of lacking what we have today. They are not allowed in the residential zone. They are in some commercial zones, but it's not a standalone approach. So with that direction, I then went to Planning Commission a few months ago, shared with them your all thoughts on it from the inputs we had back in November, and then Planning Commission went through and did their own research and comments, et cetera. So what we want to do is get to the point where we build an ordinance. But I didn't want to come in here with to your point, or with a whereas ordinance that we got to read through and figure out the legalese. I wanted to go through about 20 things that between planning commission and other things that we've gleaned out of some other ordinances, what are elements that we think we want in this ordinance, and try to get direction from us all here today, and then go to the next stage of drafting something up. Okay? So, I'm just going to run through these and make sure we all understand what they are. Planning Commission concurred. They believe we should have a standalone ordinance. Trying to take one of our bed and breakfast kind of ordinance that we have and just plain tweaking that is not a good way to go. They agreed we should have standalone ordinance. That's not surprising. Interesting approach, too, is to make sure we distinguish between owner-occupied guest houses versus entire unit rentals, which basically says if the owner is there, there may be some rules that will feel different than if it's a unit that the owner is not physically present. Okay, so they saw benefit in that, and we've seen in a lot of the ordinances we looked at that distinguishing feature there. Another one of interest from the Planning Commission's perspective is, please stop me if you guys have comments on any of these as we go.
Yeah, I have a question on the second one, actually. So looking at the owner-occupied guest houses versus entire unit rentals, because this is where I've had questions as well as Airbnb owners have reached out to me, community outreach. So a guest house, that would be like a traditional B&B, is that correct?
Well, they're all going to be defined in the ordinance.
Oh, it's going to define, okay, gotcha.
Definitions for all those, but basically, the basic difference there is if the owner is physically there and then
Gotcha.
is just renting out a couple rooms, like they're going to make you breakfast in the morning, make you have breakfast.
Sure.
They're there, and there's rooms being
And so then that makes it to where,
as
and
opposed to
Right.
it's your house for the period of time.
right, so then an Airbnb, and I'm using the word Airbnb as a colloquial term, it doesn't matter what platform it's on, Airbnb, VRBO, whatever. An Airbnb could be a guest house, it could be an entire rental unit, depending on what the settings is that the person chooses, correct?
Yes.
But it'll be defined?
Yeah.
Okay,
It'll be defined.
because I know that was
There's a whole
something,
length of- This whole thing, you have to define what
Perfect.
a boarding house is, you got to define what a lodger is, you got to define, there's a whole bunch of.
at one point we were, literally, I was going back and forth with a resident, and we were Googling and going to Webster and going to the code, and then we landed on different interpretations of what a word meant, and that's where, yeah, if we can, anything we can do to make it
That's why there are
crystal
good
clear.
ordinances out there. They have done this pain. They've gone through
Right,
this.
right.
And so
Yeah.
I'm all for taking ones that
Wonderful.
make sense. But I just wanted to get it, to understand, like one of the things, and you'll see later, I can just touch on it now, that some township or boroughs have had is said, if it's a owner occupied, with the owner is there, and they're renting out a couple bedrooms, then yeah, one night is okay. But if it's a
Right.
whole house, we're going to say X nights minimum.
Yep.
Might be 3 nights, might be 7. So, you know what I mean? And that is used as one of the criteria to decide that, maybe. So those are one of the reasons to have a differentiate between those
wonderful.
different types. Another thing that the Planning Commission suggested too, address the concentration of short-term rentals, especially in residential zones. So you might come up with a scenario that says, okay, in a residential zone, particularly for the first year, we don't want to have more than 10. They're going to be 10 licenses. And then we're going to review it and say, oh, this is fine, this is working good, no problems, or we want to cut it back to control that kind of a variable. So that's what they're suggesting to us, to have some sort of a throttle on there, particularly in the beginning. And the length, like for instance, a minimum of 3 nights, they think that we should have a 3-night minimum on anything, that's their opinion. That's something we'll need to think through. It addresses different kinds of clientele.
That's to prevent like party rentals.
Yeah, that's part of it, yeah.
When is an appropriate time for us to give input on that? Do we wait till it comes to us, or what's?
You have input right now if you want.
No, one thought I had as I first heard about this is a suggestion I would make is potentially what we don't want is 1 night, but potentially 2. Because when we make it 3 nights, we basically make it to where it's only a long weekend
Right.
versus any weekend. So that would be a piece of feedback that I would give. I know, like, for example, I'm interested in this for my parents. They were just here for Natalie's birthday, and normally they have a space in our basement. It was full of things, and so they stayed at the Hampton Inn. And I would love to give them, the Hampton Inn was nice, they had no complaints, but, I would love for them to be able to have the experience of, hey, you can stay right here in town, and then Natalie can, we can bring her over to you. And so, they were here for 3 nights, so it's kind of a moot point, but I think we have opportunities where there's people that want to come for a weekend, and so that would be my suggestion, would be considering 2 nights. And like you said, let's do it for a year and see how it goes. If it creates issues, we certainly don't want that.
Right. Okay. The next one was maximum number of rental periods. In other words, limiting the number of periods you can rent. Now, their suggestion was 90 nights in a year in residential zones, but if it's in the commercial zone, which it's allowed anyways, if it's in the commercial zone, not have a limit. So, again, trying to differentiate, trying to address the issue of a residential zone. I might live in a residential zone because I thought there were only going to be houses around here, and there was going to be no transient people going next door to me. Well, it controls that to a degree, and so that's a thought, a suggestion they came up with.
Yeah, I was just thinking that 90 days is 25% occupancy rate.
Yeah.
So basically,
1 week a
no
month.
one's going to have a business at 25%. I don't know what the standard occupancy of like an Airbnb is, but I'm guessing it's way higher than that. So that kind of, says, okay, if you want to occasionally rent out like the room above your garage, you can do that, but you're not starting a business in a residential zone that's a viable business with that.
I'm wondering as well if that 90 nights could change in a residential zone if it is a owner-occupied guest house versus an entire rental unit, if that's defined.
Yeah, we could do that. See, it gets back to that first
Right.
differentiation. You may say, well, this doesn't apply. Yeah. So we should structure it such that we can tie that to the type of short-term rental it is. Okay, I understand that. Can we go to the next slide, please? Page 2. Okay. Obviously, they said limit the number of permitted short-term rental properties. So their suggestion was only 10 in R1 and R2 zones, assessed by council annually, and no limits in the commercial zones. That was their recommendation. And then this is very common in these different ordinances where you have to define what the bedrooms are, and there's a definition of what a bedroom is, and how many square feet and what it has, and then so they don't cheat on that, and then they only advertise what it's really been approved for and licensed to, which you'll get to later. 2 overnight guests per bedroom plus 4 additional overnight guests maximum. In other words, so you can't totally. So put some sort of governor on how many people can be there.
Like 2 plus 4 or 4 maximum period?
Plus
Plus
2 guests in each bedroom, and then 4 more people scattered around. It's only 4 more air mattresses.
These rules apply to like where you live and where I live?
Yeah, well, we'll get to that in a minute, because if you're in a homeowners association trumps this whole thing.
Well, good.
So they have an overriding, so.
8 transient people rolling in and out from
It
next.
won't happen, yes. Anywhere where there's a homeowners association, most homeowners associations, I can't speak for the more, I can speak for Yardley Walk only. For Yardley Walk, it is not allowed.
It's not allowed.
But like Paula lives in a twin, right?
You can't have any rental period,
Well, if
less than
the
60 days.
if the homeowners association living there, you are guaranteed that you're not going to have one. Do people who live in regular neighborhoods, would they be consulted or let know? I mean, some people, honestly, I know people that if their next door neighbor, started running an Airbnb, they'd probably move, which would really be a sad thing to have people move, because it's a beautiful little town that we live in, because you're letting other people come here, and, you know, you have to be very careful about where you put them. That could be a game changer, and it would be sad for me to see people leaving because they felt like they had no control over that. I don't know. I'm just voicing my opinion.
No, I can speak to that a little bit because I live next door to one of the proposed Airbnbs, and not only am I next door, I share a driveway with them, and certainly I can't speak on behalf of anybody but myself, but I can say that it took me a minute when my neighbor first told me the plans, but then the more I thought it through, kind of where I landed was, and this was before I knew that it wasn't allowed, this is years ago, was why not? Let's give it a try, and if there's issues, let's go from there. And then when I started to realize, oh, my parents could rent the place next door.
No, but I'm just saying, you are a young person who hasn't lived here for many years. I'm thinking about the people who have lived here
Sure.
many, many years.
I understand that.
Never expected that. It's sort of like, you know, having, you know, an apartment go up next to your building, you know, or next to your house. It's just the same concept that, like, you don't have control over that. And, you know, you never know what your neighbors are going to be, but if you have neighbors that are constantly changing every weekend, that I'm just trying to figure out.
Sure, absolutely.
How do you adjust that, and how do we make it so that, you know, we're respecting everybody's needs?
Absolutely. And like I said, I'm only speaking for myself, absolutely not speaking on behalf of anyone else.
Your age group is more inclined to go to these and have them and rent them and.
I mean, not necessarily.
I think that that's where I object to the use of characterizing him for his age. He's a family man. He has a wife and a child. I have a cousin in her 70s who travels there.
I'm just saying,
yeah, but
you know, a younger
I respect
generations, you know,
any
sometimes
age,
feel differently.
Yeah, any age.
Yeah. Okay, and I know people your age and my age that like it, but not everybody does.
Yeah.
I feel like 2 overnight guests per bedroom plus 4 additional guests is insane.
I don't understand it, I'm sorry.
That's 6 people in a 1-bedroom or a studio. That's insane. That one is just way off. Like, I would say 2 overnight guests per bedroom, period.
Right.
6 is a
I
lot.
wonder if the 4 was meant to be the maximum. Maybe.
Real quick,
Yeah.
if you combine
You know?
that with another 4 people that are not staying overnight, stay till 3 in the morning, 1 bedroom is giving you 10 people now.
Right.
Right.
That's definitely gonna-
I have a feeling that came through like incorrectly. I don't think that they
Okay, I
meant.
hope
possible.
that's-
Yeah.
I'm
Could have been
thinking of
confused
the-
with their next one. Fortunately,
Madam President, may I ask a question of Don? Don, when it says 2 overnight guests per bedroom, what is the limit on the amount of bedrooms per facility?
well, each one's going to be licensed. We'll get to that later. And so then it'll be set up how many, depends on the size of the unit, you know, how many bedrooms there are. And it defines what a bedroom is. So if
Okay.
you have a 6-bedroom house, it could be 6 bedrooms. I mean, if you have a 2-bedroom house, it's 2.
So there wouldn't be a limit regardless of the size of the facility?
Say that again?
There would not be a limit regardless of whether it has 1 bedroom or 20 bedrooms?
Yeah, you want it to be a function of those number of bedrooms, because if you said 10 people max, then 10 people in the studio, no way.
Well, I'm
10
just not,
people in
I'm
6
just asking-
bedrooms is okay.
Simply asking
Yeah.
for clarification, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, there are ordinances out there to address this clearly. And maybe they confused a little bit with the next one, which is the limiting the number of non-overnight guests to 75% of the overnight guests. So the intent that some of these, this is to try to get around the party scenario.
Right.
Is what they're trying to say is that, you know, if you rent it out to 4 people,
You can have 3 non-overnight.
you could have 3 other people could come there, but not stay overnight. That's the ratio, that's the ratio. Excuse me?
How do you know if that actually happened or didn't? Like, who enforces that?
Wes, what are you doing at 2 a.m.?
Well, just like any of these,
Council peaks in the
you
blinds.
get complaints.
Well, I think we have the idea of issuing these licenses is to have power to revoke them.
Yes.
If
Yes.
if they don't follow the rules. So that's the power that we don't have now, because
That's a legal process, though, that you can't just, you know.
Who's gonna tell?
I think it would have to be defined.
And there are ordinances that are very specific, that have like 10 pages of the whole process from filing a complaint about whether it's noise, whether it's too many people, whether it's parking wrong, whether it's whatever the things are, to advertising differently than what you told the West you were going to have, et cetera. And then what are the fines, so much per day, and then how, 3 steps, you get your license revoked. This whole process that's involved in that.
We could also put,
Collecting the fines.
sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, collecting the fines and then enforcing that, and then how many days from like the complaint to getting the license revoked? Is that all gonna be in the ordinance?
I think so, because I'm going to copy from one of the ones that they modified their ordinance over time because they had people working the limits of it. So let's not go down that path. Let's take one that's.
I don't love a complaint-based system. I don't think we should put the onus on neighbors to feel like they have to tattle on the property next door. So I stayed in an Airbnb in Rhode Island that had decibel monitors in the building, and the owner of the Airbnb said she sends the reports of them to the municipality monthly.
Wow.
And it takes all of the guesswork out of it. If you're having loud parties, and we'll see that in the data, or Wes will see that in the data, and they get shut down. Like we have a small police force. I don't want to feel like we have to be sending them past the Airbnbs more than the other houses. So I think any way that we can collect data that is not biased is a good thing. And I can look back at my booking and see what the name of that mechanism was, because I was a little weirded out, like, are they listening to the conversation?
Yeah. What else are they doing? Are they watching me too?
Just volume levels.
Yeah.
This is a little bit like with the public safety in the events, the idea of having this structure and thinking of all these things and how we enforce it and how we do this in a way that doesn't create a burden but controls it. I think is ultimately the goal here, is to have something that is balanced, that that we have control over. Because right now it's the Wild West. There's no control over
If you're in a commercial zone, you can basically do whatever right now without this ordinance.
Exactly.
I think one thing too, to tag on what Councilwoman Thompson said, I think a lot of Airbnb owners, particularly, I'll speak for the 2 here in the borough that are interested in this that I've spoken with, both of them they care a lot about their properties and the updates they've made to them. And so just as we don't want these things to happen, they also don't want. I know, like, my neighbor next door has relocated for work, but is planning on returning to the property. He wants to do this so the house isn't sitting vacant, that he just spent a lot of money renovating and falling into disrepair. So that way there's a little bit of coming and going. But I mean, he also made the statement to me. He goes, I don't want to be a bad neighbor to you. I don't want to be a bad neighbor to the borough. If there's any issues, like, I don't want to do this. Like, he goes, I'm not in it for the money. I just want to be able to. And I said, well, again, like, I'd be interested in renting it at Christmas for my parents. Another thought that I had as well, with the two guests per bedroom plus 4, I agree, is ridiculous. Suggestion I might make is perhaps 2 plus 1. If that's 2 adults and a baby, that would mean I have to rent a second bedroom for the baby that she will not stay in. So just a thought on that as a parent.
I'll look closer at how.
Another idea that I had as well. Sorry, I have lots of comments. I've been sitting on this for a while. If we make a certain number of permits that are limited, we could also put something in place, this may already be in there, where these permits have to be renewed every so often. And so that would be a natural, where we're able to go, okay, how did this go? And then we're not relying on subjective things like the neighbor. Here's the data. Here's how many times the police were called. Okay, 0, great. Here's the number of complaints, 0 or 1. Well, let's get into it and see what it was. And then I think that could also be used in our decision making. I mean, obviously we have to be careful there that we're not using any bias in determining that. But if it comes up for renewal, that's a natural
Okay, can we go to the next page, page 3? There's only 5 pages total, don't worry, folks. I promise. Okay. Whole thing about cars and parking and 1 car per 4 people, or you got to have some sort of, something in there about cars and parking situation. And there's lots of different language on that, but I think it's important to be in there. As I noted earlier, clearly, make sure that, communities that have an HOA, can further, that trumps this short-term rules. Clear noise guidelines, quiet time definitions, et cetera. I love your idea of a meter to measure it, but anyhow, see how that's something that's in there. Owner or property manager lives within X miles of the property, and X may be 10 miles or so. So that means even if it's you're renting the whole Airbnb, but you have either a property manager or the owner themselves within, whatever we all think is reasonable, 5 miles, 10 miles. So if something comes up, at least you're not dealing with some investor in Texas, investor somewhere else who's trying to buy up blocks of properties for Airbnbs.
I think we're definitely trying to put things in place to keep that from happening.
Exactly. So, next page, please. And here we get into the more of the admin side of it, requiring an annual license, an annual report that they have to submit to say, here's all the people who rented, here's the number of people they were, when they were in and out. So you have to provide all that used for the prior year for when you get your annual license renewal.
I think that for that one, there was a mention of they have to report to the county for the tax.
Yep.
Right, so they could, right, okay. That's
A lot of the websites collect that for you.
They would, right, so they would submit the same, in other words, they wouldn't be able to make it up because they'd be submitting the same thing they'd be giving to the county.
Yep.
Right.
That would be like a,
Yep.
And just to add to that, it's important because the money that's collected is distributed to organizations through grants. For instance, Experience Yardley gets money from Visit Bucks, so it's a nice thing.
What's the allocation method, how they do that?
You have to apply. The organizations apply.
Oh, so it's, they're getting this bucket of money, and then if you have a specific thing you want to use it for, you go ask for it. So it's not going back out in some form.
No, you do have to, there are, restrictions, but you make a request and you make your, case, and if they agree, that you get money. I know that, I believe the Experience Yardley, I can't speak for this year, but when I was president of Experience Yardley, we were getting $3,000 annually, which was a nice sum of money.
Yeah.
are we able to, does anyone know if are we able to institute a local lodging tax if we wanted to?
I don't know that answer.
Just,
Is there a fee for the license?
Oh, yeah. Typically, they're $250 is a typical one for the first one, and then at least $100 a year renewal, and then there's a separate fee for an inspection, safety inspection that's done. Some ordinances have it twice a year, some have it once a year. That's very common. Proof of insurance for liability insurance is a very common thing that's in there, of course. Minimum age requirements for renters. There are some that specify that in there, which probably would be a good thing. I talked about safety inspections and establishing a fee for that and the frequency for that. And obviously proof of payment of the Bucks County lodging tax. So that's kind of a no-brainer. If you're going to do this here, you got to prove that you did that. And then also they wanted to, this is from Planning Commission also to mention too, we want to make sure that the additional requirements for rentals within the flood zone and those owner information is flowed down to the renter. So if we have an event, so how we do that, have to go figure out how to do that. So the requirements are, not only do you have to have the following safety equipment in there, and you have to, here's the kind of info that has to be available to flow down to them, what they can do and not do, and how that is impacted because of they're in the flood zone. Last page, I think. Yeah, one more. And then getting back to making sure to clearly define, what a short-term rental is, what a hotel is, what a tourist home is, what a boarding house is, and there's like 7 others.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So that it's clear, and
Spent
then.
an hour on that, I know.
And then if we want different rules for different categories of those, which we probably do. And related to that, which I didn't put on here, is even after we create this ordinance, we then got to do cleanup of our existing ordinances so that they aren't working against each other. So there's going to be a delinking and a linking process. It's going to be pretty tricky, but I have to do it. And then, of course, the license, you can have it annual, and then some of them have it that the license fee and inspection fee, the license automatically expires when the property is sold, so you start from scratch. That's kind of a no-brainer as a chance for the new people to learn the rules.
I think that also prohibits these from becoming businesses, because in cities in particular, that is, there are Airbnb businesses for sale. And so I think that's really, I appreciate that we're putting things in place to where this can't become a business just popping up wherever.
That's the idea. And then defining grounds for suspension, revoking, non-renewal of license, et cetera. You go on and on. I think it's a process of seeing one that works and it's been down there and it's been tested, and don't reinvent the wheel. I think those kinds of things should be incorporated into there.
Fortunately, those touristy places have had experience with this for like 20 years, so we're late to the party in a good way.
I know, you're right. And along the lines of that, not only is what are the grounds for all those suspensions, et cetera, and then what is the appeal process? If I didn't get my license renewal, what do I have to do? And then the enforcement process and violations and penalties, and so there's a whole admin section around that kind of stuff. So these are the areas that the planning clearly pulled out, and I did also reading a bunch of different ordinances. I guess what I would like to understand is that there's a couple of key takeaways that would be nice to see if we could feel how the council feels on the thing. Minimum night owners, whether we think a 2-night minimum is required, and do we think that should apply? Or do we think we should have a 7-night minimum? Should we have no minimums? That's one question. And the whole aspect of quotas in residential zones are things that I think should be in the ordinance, but those are things that are a little different than some of the other ones have.
Are we also within our legal right to implement a quota in commercial zones as well, or do we have no jurisdiction over that?
I'm sure we could. I'm sure we could.
So regarding quotas, I had checked, I don't know if you came across this in your research, but some municipalities do it by the percentage of houses, and I saw like 5%, for example, and I was thinking in my head, how do we start this in a safe way? Like, what's 1%? It turns out that that's 11, which is really, like, we're talking about 10. The number 10 was thrown out. So I just wanted to give it context. 10 would be 1%. If it was all of them. Now, if it's 10 and the residential is 1%, and then,
right,
I don't know if we can limit commercial. We have to be careful with that because it's like with the vape ordinance thing. To not constrict an allowed business to be able to exist.
I guess the reason why I'm asking that is because we have 2 streets within the borough that are functionally have more of a residential feel, but they're zoned commercial, East Afton and then Canal Street directly behind Borough Hall. And so, like, for example, this year, there was an Airbnb on East Afton that just popped up, didn't go through any processes at all because it's commercial. It was just like, I was just literally looking on Airbnb and, oh, here it is. I did not know we had a new
That's because we
Airbnb
have
in
no
town.
ordinance. That's what's happening.
And another thing too, it's like, again, we're not wanting to become overrun with, which I don't think there's quite that much demand to come to Yardley overnight, but I wouldn't want to see personally all of Canal Street one day become Airbnb Row, because we don't implement that. And so I think it would be all I'm asking for is just if we could have a conversation about, well, first see if it's legal, because if it's not legal, we don't do it, but see also about limiting the total number of licenses in commercial as well.
Or we might want to just think about having a limit. And
That's what I mean,
for all
just a
of it,
limit.
for all of it, and not distinguish, because maybe it's organic where they wind up.
Right.
The one thing, and I know I mentioned this last time we talked, that if I was going to invest in property and have an Airbnb, and I was going to a borough that had nothing really in it, it was just bedded deep in, it doesn't have the word short-term rental anywhere in their code, I would be leery, because I don't know whether my investment it's going to work or not.
Right.
Which is what's happened to some people here. Once we have a short-term rental ordinance clearly defined and in place, we may see an increase, because there may be people who say, oh, I'd like that location of Yardley Borough. instead of
Right.
New Hope for my Airbnb. And now there's rules, so I know what the rules are, and I can do the math to see whether it makes sense for me to go down this path.
And that's, I think, also why I'm
So that's why I
proposing.
think we should have some sort of regulator, at least in the first, as much as we can, at the beginning. Not that we're gonna have hundreds all at once, but you never know, it may change.
But that's why I have the idea of an overall limit, because
Yeah.
Your point is so good, because if you have a limit, let's say it's an overall limit of 10, right? You can always increase it, but it's very hard to reduce it.
Right. Well, we also have a lot of properties on Main Street as well that are commercial businesses, but with residential units above. I mean, nobody's done that yet, but those apartments could potentially be, I just want to make sure that we're not getting completely overrun with short-term rentals here, or even, again, not that we are, I want to make sure that we're not opening ourselves up to get completely overrun.
Yeah, I think, the point is, we want a short-term rental ordinance, but not just a free-for-all in the commercial zone as well. We want this ordinance, obviously, has to apply to that zone as well.
You were looking for feedback on number of nights. I like 3 nights. There's a function on Airbnb where the owner of the property can set it to be like 2 nights paid, 3rd night free. All it does in my mind, though, is it's keeping the property from being rented like 2 nights. So it's just adding a buffer, even if they just use it as a like check out and leave. I think 3 feels comfortable for me.
So are you saying there, if we do 3, they can implement that feature to where people can essentially rent it for the weekend?
That's what they do, they
But
price
it
it
would
such.
still be
Okay.
booked on the calendar for the 3 days.
It's booked for 3.
Yes.
Gotcha.
Less turnover.
Right.
I like that.
Nothing stopping you from leaving an Airbnb early, if you rent it.
I think 3 sounds reasonable, even without a long weekend. People take an extra day. I mean, it's a different kind of visitor. It's far away from a one-night,
And
Yeah, I don't have a hard and fast opinion. It was just something I thought it was worth opening up for discussion. But I think you made a very excellent point there, that if you can do a thing like that.
And I think, the person who wanted to have one in here and who's a realtor, she was giving very good points on how it's not just the weekend crowd. There's people coming over to support a job, a 2-week stint over working across New Jersey, or there's longer periods of time. A lot of time you're renting out, you're in between houses, you sold your house, but you can't get into your next house for a while, for 2 or 3 weeks. So it's not all a weekend crowd.
On that note, though, so right now, though, there is no night restriction, correct? And for the legal Airbnb, like the Airbnb in commercial on Canal Street, there's no night restriction. So again, maybe this is another angle. Maybe in commercial it's 2, maybe in residential it's 3, because I think something I want to be mindful of is the existing and you made a very good point that if you don't, if you start this as a business, because I don't know them, but I believe they purchased that as a business. It's always been an Airbnb since it sold a few years ago. I just want to make sure that we're not putting unnecessarily burdensome rules on something existing that has not been an issue, to my knowledge, that is.
Yeah, but you got to be fair too. I mean, you can't.
Well, I think that's where
be one rules for just because they got in
Uniform.
before.
But what if the differentiating is residential versus commercial? I mean, I'm not saying for them only. I'm saying for in a commercial zone because the surroundings are different.
So also then in a commercial zone, wouldn't parking be a consideration because our parking is already limited in the commercial zones? And wouldn't Airbnbs then exacerbate that? Would that commercial Airbnb?
That one has off-street parking.
Yeah, I would say then maybe the caveat is commercial zoned Airbnbs have to have their own parking and not rely on public parking.
What was the, in your chart, what was the mention? Didn't address parking?
It said one car for
Yeah.
4 people.
Yeah.
That was one
I see
idea.
most of them limit 1 or 0.
Yeah.
I don't see many allowing you to bring 2 cars, but.
Right.
I know the one over here, which is just one bedroom. I've seen 2 cars there. I believe they can park 2 cars off street.
So if it's 1 car for 4 people, if there was a resident there, they would have probably more than 1 car. If it's,
Right.
so-
I mean, I have
that
I
seems
have
to me
2
like
adults and I have 3 cars at my house.
Yeah, that seems to me like a net gain in parking in the commercial zone, if that's, if that's the limit.
It might be a good idea to reach out to that owner as well to get their input since they've been running one for a couple years. And that's the only Airbnb we have in the borough that's been running for multiple years. One night commercial zone, it might be a good idea to have their input so we know, like we can just hear like, okay, what's worked? Where have there been issues? I just want to make sure that we're not putting something in place that they're then blindsided by. If what they've been doing has been working.
So, yeah, just back to my earlier point about the decibels, I just looked up the listing. Our homes are protected by MINUT, MINUT. MINUT is a home sensor built for privacy. Guest privacy is our first priority. MINUT is camera-free. The MINUT sensor measures sound levels without recording or listening and measures occupancy by detecting how many devices are in the home to help protect against parties and crowds. MINUT devices don't collect, store, or share personal data.
I like that.
That's great.
$200, I looked it up, which seems reasonable.
Very reasonable, yeah.
Can you explain the mechanism of, sorry, Madam President?
Yep.
Can you explain the mechanism of how that works? In other words, who is providing that piece of equipment and who's monitoring it?
The owner would have to install it to get their license if we put it in the ordinance, and we would put in that they would have to share the data with us, and we would just confirm that they're not exceeding their occupancy license and they're not exceeding, I mean, obviously every once in a while, some noise is okay, but if they are consistently having guests that are noisy, they would lose their license.
Is that, I'm sorry, so who's paying for it again? I missed
The
that.
property owner, it's $200.
I was just thinking of, but maybe I'm totally off base here, but can they do that without self-incriminating themselves? I'm just curious for me.
No, I think you're worried about surveillance, is that what you're thinking?
No, I'm saying that if this device reports an infraction, are they incriminating themselves personally, or is that not a concern? I just don't know. I'm just asking the question.
I mean,
That's the point of the device.
yeah.
That doesn't mean it's legal. I mean, in the United States, we're not supposed to be able to.
No, I think it's just sending, it looks like from what Caroline said, it sends
I mean, it's not a.
no actual data, just the measurement of the decibels.
Yeah.
President Thompson, did you receive a report?
Like, would that
Of
be
your
like too
decibels?
much?
No.
Okay.
Good question.
I'm just curious if with a
Just
baby
asking
what
from
your
the
numbers were.
standpoint of what the solicitor may think of it.
Yeah.
I don't.
No,
No, it's something to
it's
look
an
into.
interesting,
Obviously,
it's an interesting question.
We're working sessioning now.
That's interesting.
So let's keep it moving.
I'm gonna get that
I
for my
did
kids'
promise-
room.
Yes, exactly. I did promise Kim Rock that I'd read her letter that she sent, and then if it's okay with you, we'll open it up to the public. Board members and Mr. Mayor, I am out of town and unable to attend your meeting Tuesday evening, but I'm requesting you please read my below letter at your session. I'm coming to you today to discuss the proposed Airbnb ordinance in Yardley Borough. I have reviewed the recommendations made by the Planning Commission, and I am very pleased to see the detailed and well thought out proposal they have made. If you recall my attendance and notes at the borough meeting earlier this year, the Planning Commission really seems to have hit on most of my recommendations concerning an Airbnb ordinance, as there is a great need for this in the Yardley Borough community. As an Airbnb owner myself, I see the need for regulations being outlined for how to run an Airbnb successfully and thoughtfully in regard to the community and neighbors. When done correctly, an Airbnb can be a wonderful way to bring tourism to our beautiful community, and when regulated properly, it can also be done with very little nuisance. The key is in guidelines. The things I feel are most important in keeping this to a high standard are: 1, licensing, both issuing the license and keeping it to a max level of licenses given out to avoid too many in one area; 2, proper insurance by the owner; 3, minimum number of nights stay, i.e. a long weekend versus a single night; 4, max occupancy based on bedroom size, i.e. 2 people per bedroom plus 1 or 2 extra children or babies; 5, lodging taxes collected and remitted to the borough via the booking platform or privately by the owner if not renting via a platform; 6, noise guidelines, quiet time after X time; 7, upkeep. As someone on the Planning Commission meeting mentioned, an Airbnb is cleaned regularly, landscaped regularly, etc., because they're trying to impress guests. These homes get more maintenance than a long-term rental where the tenants may stop maintaining it because they're subject to guest reviews. 8, owner location. Owners must live within X miles from Yardley Borough or out of area. Owners must at least select a representative to manage on their behalf who is located within a certain proximity from the borough, so you know someone local can be on site in a pinch when an emergency occurs and knows things are being kept up with. If using these guidelines to accept bookings, I strongly feel Airbnbs can be run in a respectful manner. I'd also like to show you an example of the types of guests these homes can bring to our area. Below are real-life examples of guests I personally had. A couple coming to visit for their grandmother's 80th birthday. The grandmother lives in walking distance to the borough. A family from China coming to visit for their child's graduation from a local boarding school. People who used to live in Yardley coming back to visit friends to celebrate their retirement and wanting to experience walking the canal in downtown and not stay 15 minutes away in a hotel. A couple having a family-only wedding at the Vault and wanting a quiet retreat after to relax. A family in between buying and selling a home, wanting to keep their kids in the same school. A local business owner remodeling her kitchen and wanting to stay close to her business on Main Street. That same local business owner having a friend from out of state come to help work in the business for the week and wanting them to stay locally and walk to shop. A songwriter originally from Yardley looking for solace for a weekend to finish writing his album and be inspired by the beauty of Yardley. A business professional from Merck coming in for a week to do a presentation in Princeton. A family buying a new construction home in Yardley that was delayed settlement and not wanting to cram their 2 children and dog into a hotel room. An aunt and mother coming to town for her daughter and niece's baby shower at Rosa Bianca. The list goes on of the respectful people who are excited to be in a small cottage along the canal instead of a hotel room by Sesame Place. And their excitement during their stay is always one of having mentioned visiting key spots like Pretty Bird, Vault, Yardley, and etc. I even had someone who stayed here when moving from Canada on a house hunting trip who fell in love with Yardley so much that they decided to buy a house here instead of Newtown, where they had originally thought they were targeting. Smiley face. With that said, I do implore you to make the Planning Commission suggestions a reality and vote it into existence sooner than later. I can be reached at the number below should you want to explore any ideas or ask me any questions. Thank you so much. Kim Rock. All right, anything else from council before we open it up to the public? Public comment? Yes, Dr. Perlmutter.
Okay. As some of you may not be aware, I had a house on the river, got hit by 3 floods, raised it, moved up to College Avenue, bought a Victorian, spent a fortune restoring it to historic, making it beautiful. The house is below me. There's a twin. When I moved in, 2 wonderful families. One moved out. The other people got married, bought both sides, 2 houses. I'm not going to give the addresses. And they're great. They were great neighbors. And 10 years ago, they decided to make it an Airbnb, one side. So for about 5 years, they were doing one side of it. For 10 years, now for the past 5 years, they've been doing both sides of it. And again, these are the good neighbors. I really like them. But you need to hear the other side of it. You're getting the side from the people like you just read, who are having a wonderful experience because she's renting it out, making money. What I'm going through is not the same. There's a lot of unintended consequences, even with good owners. The first time I ever spoke to Chief Kelly, he had just gotten here, was the bridal party disaster, with all night long, coming and going, all kinds of men. I mean, there are so many incidents. There's a gas stove in the back. One of the guests didn't know how to work it. You walked out, it smelled like the neighborhood was going to blow up. Sometimes they would rent them longer, like 6 months or a year. I've done right to knows. There's never been any move-in, move-out permits. There's never been any inspections that I'm aware of. I mean, I've done right to knows on this. No inspections with all of these people coming and going. The other just stupid little things, like whenever somebody rents, they put their trash out, and the trash is out, that trash can is just out there all the time because it's not on trash days. And I know it sounds silly, but it's what happens. I could go on, but the red line happened for me last month. Somebody came with dogs. You're not even talking about animals. Somebody came with a huge dog that got loose, went after my little dogs, got into my yard. It was awful. The same dog, 2 days later, bit someone. I mean, there's so many unintended consequences. Now, the big things, my property values. As Councilman Scherer was saying, a lot of people, why should it have to be next to me? Who's going to decide that when you give these licenses out? Because I think the neighbors like me should have a say in whether somebody's going to be next to me. It completely changed everything. And the cars, don't even get me started on the gazillion cars in and out, the revolving door. You're all talking about it. This kind of frightens me because you're all talking about it like it's already decided. And I think it's really important that somehow you nobody knows even that you're meeting tonight. I mean, I told everybody that you were to discuss this. And I think before you go too far in all these little minute details, that maybe you need to just find out how many people in Yardley Borough really want this. Like either do a poll or letters or something needs to be done, because I think that might be a really high percentage. And I'm not against it in the commercial area. People have it. But the biggest thing is I've reported this, and it's not enforced. It's been going on for years. Who's going to enforce this? Wes would need to be on speed dial. I mean, how can you enforce it? And again, I like them. I email them when there's been problems, and they try to correct them. But it's really not fair to me to have restored this home that I want to sit in my yard, and then it's just a revolving door of strangers. You never know who you're going to get. Again, parking, parties, I don't know how you can decide who gets the license, because you're literally, it should have somehow involve the person you're affecting on both sides of it. I really think that's important because it's not fair. I mean, if some people don't mind it, that's one thing. But I do think that, I don't know if it needs to be some kind of referendum or poll, but you may find out, when I do talk to people about it, they say they don't want this here. Now, again, I know people have been here a long time, but, a lot of them really think it's going to change the whole character of the town. And we have about 10 of them, by the way. I know where they all are. And they're just, again, not being enforced right now. So I just think, a lot of that needs to be taken into consideration.
Thank you, Dr. Perlmutter. You brought up a lot of really good points that we definitely need to consider. It's not a done deal. This is the beginning stages. I just want to underscore that when you don't have anything, these are the kind of things that happen. So something on the books, I wouldn't look at it as encouraging. I would look at it as regulating and having things happen in the structure within the confines of how we want them to happen, regaining that control, regaining that enforceability. I'll leave it there.
Because isn't if I'm not mistaken, the Airbnb next to you is currently, even though that is a residential zone, because they rent it out for 30-day periods or longer, I believe that is then not considered a short-term rental.
But they're not. They're doing it 2 days, 3 days. Nobody's enforcing it.
I see.
I think that part of what we're trying to get to is something that we have that's codified, that has enforcement built into it in a way that makes it harder for those things to appear. Because you're right, the enforcement, it comes down to that. But at least it's
It's supposed to be 30 days.
yeah, I mean,
No move-in, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
There's been no move-in, move-out. Never inspected. Can you imagine? Somebody's been renting this out for 10 years. It's never been a use and occupancy. I did write to nose on it. So that's a big issue too. Not to mention taxes, business privilege taxes. There's a lot of things that if people aren't, and the person used to work at the borough, so they know.
Sure.
like,
Sorry. No, you're good. No, I'm just, I mean, I've met her once. And I think just what I'm one, it's not a done deal. This is a working session, so we're having a little more free discussion. And, we're doing it in public so that people can be aware. I think what we're trying to do is situations like you're describing, we're trying to get some kind of control over that, because right now we really don't have a lot of control, because like you said, and I'm not wanting to make an accusation here, but if it's supposed to be 30, but they're doing something else, if there's nothing on the books, whereas if they had to get one of these licenses.
I mean, one thought is I was thinking back to the safety ordinance from Lower Makefield, and I think it said $1,000 per day was the fine for breaking that. It had and up to 30 days of imprisonment.
Yeah, let's make some money.
So no, but I mean, this is how we could address things like that, is to have the definitions, and then we have a fine structure. And if they meet those definitions, but they're not licensed, then they're subject to the fines. And that changes that equation. It makes it much easier for us to enforce it, because now it's a financial situation happening. Instead of Wes, there's only one Wes, How much can we do?
All right,
No,
last burning questions, yes.
My burning question is, in regards to what Dr. Perlmutter said, we work for the public, and, they entrust their faith in us, okay? And what if, because we don't know, what if the majority of the people in the borough really don't want this? Then what are we doing?
So it's a really difficult thing to collect public opinion in a good way.
I know
So
that.
very few things can be put on ballot referendum. This would not be one of them. It's set by state law what we're allowed to put as ballot referendum. We have done surveys in the past, but obviously only people who are against something fill out the survey, because if it's like passive happiness, like, I don't need to put my comment in. So every time we've done a survey, I'm thinking of the playground. I'm thinking of the budget advisory committee did one. All of the comments that we got were negative, like far and away. So should we get better public opinion before we pass each and every ordinance? Absolutely. I think we just, no.
I don't know, I don't know what to do with that because, you know, that's the big what if.
Well, and
What if we, you know, start allowing it and then we find out that like so many, like a lot of people, like a majority of the people in the borough start saying something about it, then we're kind of stuck.
So, and we're hitting this wall with, as we plan for the comprehensive plan as well. So, firms out there who do this for a living will tell you the same thing. Like, there is no good way to collect unbiased public opinion on matters like that. It's really, really difficult.
Well, I guess that's why we want to tighten up all the, you know, regulations to try to make it as least painful.
I mean, right now it's pretty open. I mean, there's a lot you can just do. And then people are just doing it and breaking the laws. And so,
This is a public meeting. It's being live streamed. People can talk about it. They can social media discuss it. They can view it, and then there'll be more because we're not making any decisions.
No, I
This
know.
is the first time we're really, have it on the table in a way that we can
but
discuss.
we'll hear
So
about it. I was cornered one
I think
morning.
over
taking-
time it'll get clearer, and the goal is to get to something balanced that satisfies the constraints. I think we can get there. Better than nothing, which is what we have now.
Sorry, Madam President, may I speak?
Yes, you may. And then we'll probably, you get the last word and we're going to move on.
Not in my house, but okay. We have spoken about the possibility of the negative opinions, and that's a fair assessment. I myself probably wouldn't want a Airbnb next to me. But that being said, from a perspective of building, the economic impact to this community, having a limited amount of licenses is probably a good thing because it entices people to come and visit Yardley and spend money here. It helps with the marketing of the town. It helps to improve our community in a way where we can, that our businesses that we as 1,100 households can't support alone. So having people come and say good things about our community is a positive. And I know, especially Ms. Rock, is one of those people that I'm sure would do a stand-up job in conducting, her Airbnb. And I think it's important to think of it in those terms too. So I just wanted to throw that out there as an alternative to the negative.
Yes, Mr. Parker.
Just a couple thoughts. Regarding the floodplains, our only method of doing an evacuation is through the Everbridge system, which is an opt-in system. Even with a property manager within a reasonable amount of distance from the borough, if the phone call comes at 2 a.m., most people anymore don't answer phone calls for numbers they don't know, or if they even answer the phone at all. So there's going to be a delay now of getting warning to somebody who's here for a weekend or a short term in the floodplain. I have a concern with that. I think that deserves a little bit more consideration. Just to touch on the noise issue, we do have a decibel level ordinance that is enforceable. I've done it, but it does require neighbors to file a complaint. But they can also do that anonymously. But that's, some people, it's a Friday night, go ahead and have a party. It's not going to bother them, as long as it's not every Friday night. But that's up to the neighbors to figure out. And lastly, I would like to point out that our current guest house ordinance is in chapter 27, which is zoning. I would suggest that any new ordinances not be in chapter 27, probably in chapter 12 under housing. That's because violations of the zoning ordinance typically have a 30-day window for enforcement. So we can't take immediate action if something were to go wrong. As an example, recently, one of our Airbnbs that should not be operating but is, they had the guests called EMS because they were being sick with carbon monoxide. So I would like to see a trigger in there. If something like this were to happen, that we can have an immediate inspection done to ensure that repairs are made, not give them 30 days to make repairs.
Yeah.
So to that point, like, and to bring up David's point earlier, then perhaps all of the committees should have had a look at this before this evening, so public safety could have weighed in. Because those are all valid points.
All right, you got your inputs done? All right. Mr. Finer.
Complicated. Okay, this next item, what I'll do is I'll put a motion on the table that's going to maybe sound a little strange, and then we can discuss it because it's going to differ from what's in the packet. So I'd like to make a motion to apply for the DCED MTF grant for the West Afton Avenue sidewalk in an amount not to exceed $6,900 with funds to be drawn from capital projects. Is that clear?
Sure.
Okay.
There's a motion on the table. Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion is made by Councilperson Finer, seconded by Councilperson Stump.
Okay. So just a little bit of history here. So Afton Avenue sidewalk, we're talking about connecting Lower Makefield and Yardley through sidewalk, the ability to walk up and down. The work on this dates back to work that was done in 2014 and before that. It's actually in the 2014 comprehensive plan. I dug this out, and it's actually the first item under bicycle and pedestrian pathway linkages. So it's a vital connection in both directions. Obviously, thousands of residents live in Lower Makefield and want to be able to visit the heart of Yardley, our shops, our independent businesses, but also residents in the borough. Those of you who have children, well, yours are young, or yours is young, but mine are at an age, teen and tween, that they like to go to the library, to the playfields, to the pool, whatever, and that's the main way to get from Yardley Borough to those places. So it has those needs. These types of projects in the past we used to fund ourselves, like those of you who are here, been here for a while, remember the sidewalk fund. And then we started using grants, and those grants often require matches. And I remember the sidewalk, you've heard me say before, it used to be $240,000 for the entire sidewalk. And that number kept increasing way before the inflation that then made it increase even more. So it's in our interest to get these projects done, and I think that having them sit in the comprehensive plan and not acting upon them doesn't do much. And to act upon them takes years. We're on like a year-to-year schedule with our budget, but we need to think what's going to take, some things take 5 years, some things take 10 years. The key here is we need to get these things in the pipeline for the grants so that we can be funded. So what I did with this proposal is, and let me just talk about the MPF grant for a moment. This is the grant that we've been the most successful in obtaining. One of the great features about this grant, unlike the vast majority of grants, it is a 100% grant. So it pays for engineering, for design, for construction, and we don't have to match it with any amount of our own. That is very rare. And for example, the North Main Street sidewalk, I don't remember how much we spent totally in applying for the grants. It was maybe 10 or 15,000. And we got 1.6 million from the 2 grants that we won. So I calculated the rate of return is like over 10,000%, better than you get in a 5% bank account. So my point is that we need to get these grants into the pipeline, because you might get it the first year, you might not. Then they look at it you see, oh, that's come around again. Maybe they'll give you part of it, maybe they'll give you the whole thing. We don't really know, but we have to get them in the pipeline. This grant originally was written for $9,800, I think it was, and I went over it with engineer Pat Foley. And the reason it was higher than some of our other applications is because there is a bridge there over the creek that has like an old sidewalk attached to it, and it's unclear the extent to which it needs to be upgraded. There's ADA requirements and modern requirements with PennDOT and all of that. So he had built some of that exploratory work into being able to do the grant application, which is due by the end of July. It's a lot of work, but he feels confident that he can get it done with a viable application. I scaled it back. I asked, what's the minimum viable application we could have without doing some of that work? Because my sense is that you can apply for a grant, and essentially, they're going to look at the purpose of the grant more than that level of nitty-gritty detail. So I'd rather shift that over into the grant part of it, the design part, than pay for that ahead of time. So we got that down to $6,900. And why are we, and RVE has had, another question is, well, should we, bid this out to multiple engineers? We could certainly bid the work out, but I think in terms of the grant applications, there's not a lot of change there. This is not a lot of money, relatively speaking. And RVE has had this is one of the areas I think they've done very well in because we've gotten these grants. So either we, looking at Don's budget presentation, it's not like we want to spend more money. This year we only had $5,000 allocated to grants. We had $15,000, I believe, the previous year. The reason is because we didn't know that we were going to get the North Main Street sidewalk grant. Now that we got that, we need to put things into our pipeline for future years. So my idea is to take $6,900 from our, what's it called?
Capital reserves?
Capital projects. I keep getting confused with capital reserve. Capital projects fund, which is for capital projects. This would be capital project. And the idea is that we could write this grant, send it to try to get the MTF DCED money for next year. We might or might not get it, but we could also use that and send it out to the LSA to try to get the LSA money, which we applied for a different grant for. We could ask them if they'd be open to amending it and send them a copy of it. And then in future years, we could use this same application if we don't get it. So you just have to update like the costs of the things, but the work that was done, the vast majority of it is already there. So my view is we're going to spend it anyway. Why wait a year to do this? Why not just do it now, get it in the pipeline, and then repeat and repeat? And that's why I propose using capital projects funding rather than our main funding.
No question. Do we know how much that sidewalk is going to cost?
The site work, you mean, well,
Sidewalk.
we don't know, that's the thing. So that this cost will determine the cost. This is the work to be done to determine the cost of putting in that sidewalk, and then that would go in the grant application.
So we don't know how much, I'm just trying to understand.
Yeah.
We don't know how much a sidewalk's going to cost. We're asking for $7,000, which isn't probably going to touch anything.
No.
$7,000 for the sidewalk.
No. It's the
It's just for the grant.
$7,000, $6,900 to be accurate, is the grant, is the amount that we pay for the work to be done to create a grant application, determine the price. Let's say the sidewalk is, I don't know, $700,000. We'll find that out as part of the process, and that goes in the application, and then that goes out to DC.
We need to have the $6,900 to start things.
Exactly.
And I just heard we don't really have extra money, so.
Well, that's why I'm proposing to use money from capital projects, which is
So
not.
let's take a step back. So
Yeah.
we have
Sorry.
231,000 as of end of Q1 in capital reserves. What is that account for, Councilperson Carlson? What have we used it for in the past? I know 4 years ago, there was only 70,000 in there, so we've been growing it. Do we have any
Grew by the tax increase.
Correct.
Consciously.
Do we have any documentation on what that fund is for?
Capital projects is more of the projects that we want to do. Most of that money was a loan from Newtown. You have to keep in mind, come August, $100,000 is coming out of there, and next August, the rest of it needs to leave. So,
there's really only 31,000 in there.
yeah.
What's the total amount of that loan from Newtown?
What was it, 300,000 or something like that a couple years ago.
28 plus 102, it looks like on here.
Yeah.
And what was that?
How much would get replenished for 2025, in the next,
How much will
That-
get replenished?
because that fund gets replenished from our,
No, the you're thinking capital reserve. There's capital reserve, there's capital projects. Capital projects is mostly that loan from Newtown. That has to go back to Newtown. Capital reserve is the reserve for projects such as Borough Hall. We have a $70,000 bill to fix the roof over the police department. I'm sorry to keep bringing this up, but I have to buy Charlie and Will hats with umbrellas on because it consistently rains. I understand everybody wants to do sidewalks. We have to take care of this building. It's starting to crumble. We have to really look into looking at our assets here.
of course, so we should apply for a grant for that as well, but that's not related to this.
I understand, yes, we should, but, I know we did talk to Lower Makefield about a joint application for this, and I think that would be much more favorable, I think, to anybody looking at these applications. So I don't understand the rush to apply for this right away, spend $7,000 that we really don't have, when we have to really look here, look around. We really need to look at the borough on the whole.
Well, we're not, the Borough Hall, you brought this up earlier, Borough Hall is not competing with the sidewalk. They're two different things. They're very important in their
Continue
own.
to take 7,000 here, 6,000 here, 5,000 here, then it is taken away from.
Okay, well, let me go back to your point about Lower Makefield, because I just spoke to my contact there. And the issue with why would we want to do this now is because we have a lot more complexity with our side of the project, with the creek there. Their side is, it's a lot simpler. So we would get a head start. We would probably catch up with them because they're on a 1 year behind us schedule. They're working on Taylorsville Road now. They're going to do that probably at the same time we do our sidewalk. So I believe they're going to match up, but we're going to spend this money anyway. Why don't we spend it this year, get it in the pipeline, and give ourselves the opportunity to get some or all of that funding now. We don't have to use it right away, but we'll get it. We're going to spend it. This $7,000 for a grant, this is not the place where I think we need to save money. What we need is more grants, not less grants. And I would love to work with you to get a grant for Borough Hall. I don't think we should spend $70,000 out of our own capital reserves to pay for the roof. That's why I asked you recently to send me for estimates of the roof. So this is the first I heard 70,000, because I heard you mention 200-something thousand. 70 sounds like,
I just had somebody come, and it's $70,000.
that's great.
$5,487. Here you
So
go.
that might be LSA. I'm not sure, but I think we should absolutely do that. And I would say the same thing. Let's say it costs us $5,000 to get a grant. Maybe it would cost less for a roof because we can get the estimate. Let's say it's $2,000. Let's do that. That's not the place to save money, applying for
Councilman
grants.
Snyder, hold on 1 second. So capital projects, all of that money essentially is spoken for. So do you want to amend your motion to the capital reserve fund?
I will amend that motion
And
to the capital reserve fund.
Councilperson Stump, do you second that amended motion?
Sure.
The same person?
Did I second or did David second
I
it?
gave it to you.
Okay, thank you. I'll second the
Okay.
amended motion.
Now that we have that settled, let's continue our discussion.
How much is in this fund?
Good question.
Sorry, I thought that's the one that we were talking about. That one's 231. They're essentially the same. The other one's 228.
Okay.
So wait, if there's 228,000, could we in theory take the 7,000 out and also,
Well, let's talk about that fund. So we're talking
Okay.
about the capital reserve now, Don. What's going on with that fund?
I'm not prepared to answer.
No,
that
yeah.
tonight.
But it doesn't replenish, correct? We
No,
just
it's not
we
replenished. So
we
basically,
filled it one time
what
in
you're doing is you're doing an
2020.
advance on next year. So you're setting yourself up for a budget next year that's going to need an infusion. That's what you're setting yourself up for if you pull this. And I assume and you got another one on the table that's the same amount of money. You got two of them tonight, so, right?
We have the Dolington one that's
Right.
50.
5,000 something.
5,000 something.
You're not really taking 6,900, you're taking.
Well, I'm dealing with one at a time, but yeah, right, right. But here's the thing, if we don't do it now, and we put it in the budget to do it next year, then we're spending it anyway. So, however, it's probably, my experience is things usually cost more, and we lose a year in creating funding in the pipeline, because the only way we're going to get any projects done is through grants.
But it's not a given that it's going to be in the budget next year, right? Like, it's not a done thing that these expenditures.
Well, I mean, it depends if you want to sit here and say to the Yardley Borough residents, no, your children are not important enough to have a sidewalk.
I really think that's a big.
It's in the comprehensive plan.
The
from
comprehensive plan is a
2014.
guideline, it's not a prescription.
But I mean, these things have been worked on for 20 years. This isn't like new stuff.
It's not an emergency. I mean, if you have a roof that's leaking, I mean.
And that's-
No,
Ridiculous
that's,
notion.
they're not competing. Well, I don't think it's ridiculous. I don't know if you have kids, but my kids, they try to get around
Yes, but I have
safely.
a 26-year-old child.
Okay. So, you don't want your kids being hit by a car because there's no sidewalk. If you want to
Folks,
bring it out to the
I
residents.
think we all want to do the sidewalk. I think the question on the table is, we have $231,000 in savings. Do we want to spend a large percentage of that, or a good percentage of that, on this project, which is an unbudgeted expenditure? Maybe we do, and maybe we don't. So let's reset. Any other comments here? Or anything to add? I was wondering, we met with Bob Cummings, who lives up on the new homes on University, and he pulled all of the old grant documents. Is any of that usable again? Because a lot of the
Yeah.
legwork was already done. Like, is it really 6,900? I'm just having trouble with that number when we usually pay between 4 and 5 for most grants drafted by RV. That seems.
Yeah, I think the I asked Pat that because that's a very good question, and I also asked for the old documentation. I think the complexity is that bridge and what PennDOT wants with that to deal with getting over the creek. That seems to be, and that's as far as I know. He's not here tonight, but I worked very hard to try to reduce that number, and I got to a point where he wasn't comfortable anymore.
I was on that call, right?
Well, this was more recently than that, but yes, you were on
I
that.
was on those
That was a
calls where we
previous
were
one.
Trying desperately to find a way to reduce.
I just think you get to a point where you have a non-viable application and you kind of shoot yourself in the foot by eliminating too much from it. And I'm all for, like, let's put those things together, but it doesn't look, if you look deeper into it, it doesn't look like something that has had as much thought into it. And I think, like I said before, certainly, I think we would have our issues with various firms that we work with, and I've had my issues with RVE working through 5 engineers. But this is an area I give them credit for. They've been good with the grants. We've gotten them, so.
But you
that's-
aren't expecting to get them here. We want to build momentum, is what you're saying, right?
What I want to do, what I see it and what we've spoken about is to have these projects in the pipeline for grants. We don't know what we're going to get. We don't know how is there going to be a recession next year? Is there not going to be a recession? You get them in there, and then you may not get them the first time. We've had that happen many times. But then they look at the next year. They give you all or part of it. And they look at the following, like Main Street, North Main Street, Phase 3. They gave us, I think it was 570 first time, then the other 1.1 the next time. So if you don't put them in the pipeline, you're never going to get them done. You wind up with 10 years later, it's 2034. Oh yeah, that was in the comprehensive plan. So that's what I'm trying to do. And I understand, I don't want to sit here and ask for more money. We don't have the money. So it's to look and see, okay, what's a smart use of our money? We're going to spend this anyway. We spend it this year instead of next year, then it gives us one more year in the pipeline. that's the thinking, and I absolutely think we should apply for every building grant. I think we should, I mentioned before, send you to grant school. I saw Pennsylvania Association of Boroughs has a lot of like grant courses, and they have like third parties that can do grants, grant writing. But these kinds of grants with engineering are expensive and complicated because they require like engineering drawings.
Yes, Mayor Harding.
Just a quick question. So, Councilperson Applebaum mentioned a call, and Councilperson Finer working with RV. Are we being billed for these calls and this work that he's doing to this point?
Those calls are, we used to have 2 meetings a month here. So those calls are supposed to be, like, we have 1 meeting now. We used to have 2 meetings plus a public works meeting, and that was included. Those calls are supposed to be, like, some number of hours of those equate to the calls that we do with them outside of that. However, that particular area of billing has been something we have not worked out yet. There's been some confusion between, I don't know if Paula might have more information. Well, I would like not to, but I don't know if it's been fully worked out. There was some contention there. I don't want to get into, I don't know if you want to say.
They are, to date, they have been on the bills. We are, however, elevating it up to the one of the vice presidents at RVE, because the argument is they were coming to 2 meetings, now they're coming to 1, and we want to repurpose those hours. If they don't agree to that, we'll obviously rethink things, but that's where we stand currently. I think, so I've long said that I will not vote on anything on the West Afton sidewalk because I am one of a handful of borough residents who are directly benefit from it. So I'm not sure. I think we're going to split what we do then. So I'm going to call the question if we're ready.
Are we ready or more?
I just want to make one comment that my hesitancy is around steamrolling this through now because we have a deadline coming up here when this has to be done, and we'd have to act on it next council meeting. And in the past, I've seen where we've had to go back and we do, if it doesn't get approved this coming year, then we'll go resubmit it again the next year. And I've listened to Mr. Foley say that'll be another $3,000, please, to refresh because I got to get new cost estimates, inflation has changed, now the scope's a little different, we got to do different cuts, and so we end up spending more engineering money than we should. And now granted, I'm not on public works, so I haven't seen the details, but I don't think we've flushed this out enough to even know which side of the road we're going up. Are there retaining walls involved? What's the scope of what's the project really going to be? And are we going to, I just think we're ramming it in to try to get it done for the next council meeting. I don't think that's pretty.
I agree.
I think we're going to repay for it again next year.
I don't think there's enough
I
information.
would take, I'm going to choose my words carefully, not exception, because I understand why you're saying this, but Ori, myself, Jarrett, Patrick, Paula have been on many, many calls. We've spent many, many hours, not all billable, trying to get through this in a very thoughtful way. And I think that, unfortunately, what your perception is, unfortunately, is caused by the fact that we don't have these regular work sessions, or as often as we not should, but if we did, you would know more about what we're trying to do. So we're not trying, and please don't take this the wrong way, I'm not trying to insult you, but we're not trying to push this through or anything of that nature. We've worked very, very hard on this. And I don't know how better that you, Ori, can make the case to do this, except I would say that you're right. I know how long this project has taken to get completed. I know how long you've lived there with the promise that there'd be a completed North Main Street sidewalk. And I also know, and I think to be fair to Paul, and I do appreciate what you're saying, Paul, I do feel for you because I do speak to those officers, and we all laugh, but it's not funny, but it's, but $6,900 is not going to replace that roof. So I would like to see it go towards this project so that we have it in the pipeline, so you don't continue to delay this project. Because as Ori pointed out, we keep delaying it, and you, Don, said yourself, then there's going to be more costs because we're going to keep doing this year after year without having that money available to do what Ori is suggesting. So I'll stop there.
Yeah, I think, thank you, David. I think I'm talking about taking concrete incremental steps here. And I spoke to Don earlier today, and it was a great conversation. You have some great ideas. We thought about maybe I could get we could find a design grant and just get a grant for just a design. Then I talked to Pat Foley about that. The problem with that is that those grants are not non-matching grants. They're match grants. So in the end, it would cost more to just get a smaller grant to get the design because we'd have to pay the match, whereas a grant like this pays for the whole project, which includes 10% of it for engineering. And then the idea of, well, do you need a retaining wall? Do you need this? Do you need that? That's why it gets expensive. So cutting that down, and what I tried to do is say with everything that there is a question, put in the grant for the higher possibility, because we're just trying to get a grant, right? So then we have the money from the grant to design work. We discover, oh, there's a cheaper way to do this. That's fine, because we've already got the funding. So the name of this game, and I realized when I came here to be on Public Works, I came back to council, is that it's all about the grants. That's the bottom line. If we don't do grants, we're basically not doing public works, whether it's Borough Hall, sidewalks, better crosswalks, whatever it is that we're doing. We just, 800,000, was it? I mean, that's bupkis, as they say in my religion. I don't know. Anyone else?
I'll vote? I have a few things I'd like to say before we vote on this. So, first of all, I do want to say Borough Hall is definitely a priority. And if I'm understanding the numbers correctly, if we have 232,000, we could, in theory, do this. In theory, we could pay the whole 70,000 to replace the roof and still have money left over. But like you said, let's try to get grants for the roof. And I think we're also going to move on that as well. I mean, I don't want us to delay on the roof for Borough Hall. I'd like to have that tied up by in the summer if we could, the end of the year, definitely. So that, just to speak to that is definitely a priority of ours. Secondly, I did the numbers on the 232,000, and 3% of that comes out to $6,960. So we're talking about 3% of the money we have in capital reserves. I did another calculation. $6,900 divided by 2,605 borough residents comes out to $2.65. And just what I'd like to go on the record as saying is we need to, like you said, take incremental steps toward things and move toward and not just talk about, well, we're going to do a sidewalk one day, we're going to do this one day, we're going to do this one day. This is the most requested thing I'm asked about as chair of community outreach by residents of the borough. And especially since we, and many of us on council, begin commenting in Mr. Cummings' Facebook group. I mean, people are starting to ask, like, hey guys, it's been 6 months. When is this going to happen? To which I've looked them in the face and with a smile said, well, this is local government. We're actually moving very quickly. And so I think spending this small amount of money, 3%, would actually answer some of the questions of what is the total cost? What grants do we need to be applying for? I mean, even if we don't get this grant, we now know how we get across the river. We know whether we need retaining walls. We know we have, and then we can also go to the residents when they're asking us and say, this is where we're at, versus, well, we're still just talking about it. And so that's all I have to say. I'd like to see some progress, and I also hear what you're saying, Manager Johnson, and I don't think that necessarily means we don't care about other areas, but this is what's on the table for us tonight.
Thanks.
So who's taking ownership of Borough Hall? So I'm hearing people say that we're prioritizing it. I do think that it's a public works umbrella. So who is going to move that forward? I heard an LSA grant. I just don't feel like if you look at the awarded grants, I think we can say all day long, well, you can apply for grants, but I've only seen borough halls remodeled, or municipal buildings remodeled in one municipality in PA, and it was the $1 million match grant, where they give $1 million and you give $1 million, which
Yikes.
we're never gonna be able to do. So, and I've never seen a grant awarded for a roof, and I review the awarded grants for all of the grants that we normally apply for. So I think we just need to keep our feet on the ground a little bit in terms of, is a roof that's leaking, that's normal maintenance on a building that we are custodians of, is that really something that another agency is gonna give us money for? And I don't know that
That's a fair point.
that's true. I also just want to say 3% of our savings account, like our only savings account that's really readily accessible to us. So that's, I mean, we need, we don't have a lot of savings. No. And we have a lot of people who depend on us. So, with that said, does the public have any comment? I will call the question. We will do roll call. I'll start down here. Councilperson Applebaum.
So I'm in favor, yay.
Councilperson Scherer.
Nay.
Councilperson Siegel-Morris.
Nay.
I will abstain. Councilperson Finer.
Yay.
Councilperson Carlson.
Nay.
Councilperson Stone.
Yay.
I don't know what we do.
The mayor brings the time.
The mayor breaks the tie.
Yes, you do.
You do.
Okay.
There you go.
We've never tied,
All right.
I don't think.
So I would tend to side with Councilperson Carlson's comments this evening, so I would vote nay.
Thank you. Motion fails. Do we want to discuss the other one?
Yeah. The other one is for applying for the DCED grant for the Dolington Road sidewalk. This is the Dolington part that extends to tie in with the North Main Street Phase 3 and the Taylorsville Road sidewalk that Lower Makefield is working on. It's the little section in Dolington that starts at the edge of the borough and goes to the corner where there is a crosswalk as part of the North Main Street sidewalk project. So it completes that connection. Similar story as with Afton, it connects thousands of residents to the streets of Yardley in both directions. This one is total amount of $5,650. So, and I will make a motion to apply for the DCED MTF grant for the Dolington sidewalk, Dolington Road sidewalk extension for the amount of $5,650 from the Capital Reserve Fund.
Is there a second?
Second, yes?
Motion is made by Councilperson Finer, seconded by Councilperson Applebaum. Discussion.
The only thing I would say is that
This one's cheaper.
it's cheaper, and I would throw out the possibility, because a lot of our costs are questionable, it doesn't have to come from capital reserve, or part can come. I mean, I'm open to, people have thoughts on that. This one is even more timely. I think they're both important, but this one, because of the work that's being done there, it fits right in with that, and it would complete that whole section of town. There are only two vital connections left. There's that one in Afton. So, but I think we've exhausted most of the things we can say about these.
Yeah, does anyone have any opinions on pulling elsewhere? That was the only new thing that was brought up.
I have a different opinion on this one. I know you probably don't think I would, but, well, I still think that the money's a little high, but looking at the scope of what's involved there, it looks very simple to me, but I haven't been on your committee, so I don't know that. But I do think that the possibility exists that if we got this one in and got this, we might end up paying for it by the reduced construction cost, because while we're doing Phase 3, picking up and going across the street and knocking this off, if we could get the approvals in front of it, I bet you would offset the $5,000. We might get enough savings out. So when you look at the big picture of all the money, the buckets, it has a better chance of, first of all, I think it has a better chance of happening in a time frame and supporting with Phase 3. And, you know, the other one just scares me, the engineering, the water coming down the street, and Lower Makefield doesn't want to do it, are all strikes against the other one. So,
Is it possible to, when we apply for grants, say we have $4,000 to spend, do your best application you can with $4,000?
We can, but yeah, we've done those before, but the danger is that we don't have a viable enough. Where are they cutting that from? The more the projects look shovel-ready, and
But
tight.
but back to your point, like, we hope we get it, right?
Well,
But if we
yeah.
don't, we're building the momentum for
Right.
the future, so.
Well, with this one, there is a difference also that I did speak to my contact at Lower Makefield, and they would mention this in their application, because they're applying for a grant to do Taylorsville Road, so that becomes a multi-municipality mention. We then mention ours as well as theirs, and so I think that raises the likelihood of being chosen, because it is multi-municipality and it's completing something where the work's already being done. And then to Don's point about construction, you actually have 3 projects then that could potentially join in construction, or at least in bidding, depending on the timing of it.
Thank you.
So yeah, I wouldn't cut it. I mean, I'm very much one to cut, but I don't think it's the right place to cut, at least with the current setup we have.
So
All right, sorry, I will say this. If somebody feels like they just can't approve it beyond a certain amount and you want to throw that amount out,
No, my
I'm open.
problem is more that we're setting a precedent that we will dip into capital reserves when we are running a deficit budget, and I just don't feel like we have enough on the books in terms of policy of how and when we touch that. And I think it was a mistake that we only budgeted 5,000 for grants. I understand why we did that, but we are completely grant reliant for any of our capital projects. So let's not do that again. But I just feel like we set a precedent reaching into reserves for a one-off here.
Can I ask another question about that? Do we have to specify that it's from reserves, or could we, if the numbers improve, we don't really know which way it's going to go. If they get better, then we wouldn't have to dip into reserves. And if they continue to go, then we could make that a separate motion in the future.
What you're asking is you want it contingent that we don't take it from capital funds.
No, I'm asking if we could just, if we could just revise the motion, remove that part of it, right? And, because actually, we don't really have to take it from the reserves. We could replenish later on if we needed to, which we would do anyway.
I mean, we're going to pay our bills, so I think it does matter where we take it from, but I don't know how that would happen. What happens if we run a deficit? What do we do?
I would rather take it from the Public Works. Take it from,
Yeah.
tell him to get it out of the engineering. He's under budget right now, so far year to date.
Covers it.
Have him cover it.
I feel
65 over, so.
I feel the same as I felt with the
I'm not so sure he can cover the whole thing.
6,900.
but
I
he should
feel
be
the
able to
same
cover
with
half.
the 5,600 or whatever it is.
Okay, so I do think where we get it matters, though. Would you like to revise your motion? Or no? About the capital reserves?
Can we get it from Public Works, from where we're under in engineering? We can?
Have you asked him?
I'm asking, Don's closer to numbers, they're right there, so if you want me to
He's
do
under
it.
now, and he's under on his run rate, but I don't know what projects, what you got him working on. You know, I don't know his future.
Well, I don't want to cut him off if he's in the middle,
Right, so you got to balance that versus.
How about
other stuff
half?
he's got going.
Half from there and half from general fund.
Getting a commitment to what his number is going to be.
It's not to
For the
exceed, by the way.
What's that?
The amount he put there is not to exceed. It could be less. That's the. Yeah, I'm just saying,
I haven't seen that happen.
yeah. I actually have seen that.
Is that meaning general fund as opposed to capital reserves?
Right, we're taking capital reserves off the table, and we're saying that half of it would be from the existing public works budgeted amount, of which we're under. And half
For
would be.
now, but what about when, like, projects start and stuff? I just worry about, then we're gonna be cutting him off when he's actually doing a viable project, and then where are we gonna take that from? Then that budget line item's gonna go berserk, and everybody's gonna be, oh crap, we're in the red here. Yeah, Pat, why did you do
We'll
that?
have
And
to
it's
deal with
not.
that then.
Yeah,
And it won't be Pat's fault.
no.
To me, though, this is part of Phase 3 of the North Main Street sidewalk, which is moving forward. And so I agree with what Councilperson Carlson said. This is different than the other one that we just voted on.
It's part of it, but we didn't make it part of it, so we don't have the money for it.
But what we're trying to do now is make it happen, so that we can do the construction simultaneously.
Raising,
Money that we don't have, though.
well,
Well, we're voting to, we do have money. That's what the question is on the table for, to
we're
potentially.
raising the money. That's the whole idea, is we raise the money, and it doesn't come, I mean, the residents pay 5,000 something, and we get whatever the cost is to do it from the state. That's a pretty good deal.
All right, so you're keeping the motion as is.
I'm going to change the motion
Change the motion.
to apply for the DCED MTF grant for the Dolington extension in the amount not to exceed $5,650, half of which would be funded from the Public Works Fund and budget line item. Is it a fund or a budget line item? Budget line. Engineering budget line item of Public Works.
And the other half.
The other half is unspecified. Does that work? The other half from the general fund. No?
Just put the whole thing from there. And then
Okay,
what
all right, then we'll have,
happens- Here's
okay.
what in reality will happen, okay? We're
Yeah.
going through the budget process.
Right.
So we're going to say to him, it's coming out of your engineering budget, okay? Then when he sits here in October and we go through all the stuff we want for next year, and Pat gives us all his inputs, and then we go through the pecking order and decide how to do it, hopefully he's going to come to the table with a good number for the finish to 2024, okay? That'll cover this. If he doesn't, he's going to be asking for makeup money, if you will. We're going to have to make it up,
and
right?
then we'll deal with it then.
And that's when we'll deal with it.
Okay, fair enough.
All right, so
So I'll just do it over again, so we have it for the recording. So the motion is amended to be a motion to apply for the DCED MTF grant for the Dolington sidewalk extension in an amount not to exceed $5,650 to be funded from the engineering line item in the Public Works part of the budget.
And Councilperson Applebaum, do you second the amended motion?
I do.
Is there any further discussion from council? From the public? I'll call the question. I'll start down at this end this time. Councilperson Stump.
Yay.
Councilperson Carlson.
Yay.
Councilperson Finer.
Yay.
I'll vote nay. Councilperson Siegel Morris.
Nay.
Councilperson,
Me.
sure.
Nay.
Councilperson Applebaum.
Yay.
All right, motion carries 4-3. Is there anything else? If not, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved?
Is there a second? Motion was made and seconded. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye.